He should definitely be in jail, but there we are. I mean, genuinely should be in jail. He's absolutely lied and cheated the American people and indeed the rest of the world. Ian Collins is here. Another quiet news day for you, my love.
Very quiet news day, not a lot going on, so we're still scrambling. I can't really say anything. We haven't found what to talk about yet because it's so barren out there. It's difficult. But we might just hop across the pond and cover everything that's going on with the inauguration.
Absolutely. And, of course, I mean, this extraordinary scenes there in the Liverpool Crown Court related to Axel Rubicana and the Southport attack. Thank you very much for listening. Big thanks to Sam Armstrong. Ian Collins up next. I'm Julia Hartley-Breath. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock, Donald Trump promising to sign almost 100 executive orders, potentially around immigration and gender, some as soon as he's sworn in as the 47th president later today. We'll have more on that. And is Donald Trump going to save the world, change the world? What do you think he's likely to do over the next few years? We'll talk about that in more detail in a few moments. Also, British-Israeli woman Emily Damari was among 3 hostages freed by Hamas after 15 months in captivity. This was part of the opening phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal. We'll cross and have more on that too. And the teenager accused of killing 3 girls in a knife attack at a dance class in Southport in July last year has now pleaded guilty to their murders. All the updates on that story as well. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Is Donald Trump going to change the world? Do you think he's... look at what's happening over there. Executive orders. There's a flurry of these things. Big excitement on Capitol Hill. Previously, people who have gone nowhere near Trump are kind of almost joining forces. Yeah, come on, let's make it happen. And I understand that as well. I think it's right. And, you know, when you consider what goes on in this country at the moment, we've got a pretty... by any standard, I was about to say a pretty rubbish government. I don't even think I can find the superlatives to fully cover the levels of heady ineptitude that we are experiencing with the current government. I mean, the only thing you could say is, well, maybe they'll recover. Look, I want my government to succeed. Even if they're not a government I voted for. I want them to succeed with bells on, even if I didn't vote for them. And I think many people in the United States are possibly now crossing over and realising, look, this was a man that had a very convincing win, but the Biden era came with it a lot of baggage, and it wasn't the baggage of the economy as such, it wasn't just the baggage of immigration as such, it was the mood music, and that mood music is written on a hymn sheet that is also used by Keir Starmer. It's a sort of a groupthink, globalist idea of how you run things. You get the DEI in there, make sure every government employee puts their pronouns at the end of an email. It's all of that. And America, quite rightly, like any intelligent group of people, have said, sorry, this is just bloody nonsense. We got blokes playing in women's sport. I'm being told that if I ask somebody why they put the pronoun they, then I could go to jail for that. This is bonkers, man. That's why Donald Trump's your president, Governor. It's as simple as that. At 4:47 this afternoon, Donald Trump becomes the next president of the United States. It's timed to be 4:47 because he will be the 47th president of the United States. It was interesting. Matthew Paris wrote a piece in the Times today. And he wrote this, amongst other things: Donald Trump is a slob, a cheat, a lawbreaker, a bully, a careless liar, a cheap jingoist, and a very dangerous politician indeed. He appeals to the dark side, the chaos in human nature. We asked Matthew to come on and talk about that, and he very decently, he's a very decent man, if you're aware of Matthew Paris, the journalist, been around the block forever, former Conservative MP. He declined our invitation, but he pretty much fessed up that the column he'd written this morning had kind of exploded. So he didn't want to talk about it anymore. I noticed somebody said he might be all of those things. However, someone like Trump doesn't just materialise. He is a response to absurd levels of illegal immigration, culture wars, and these do impact on our minds. DEI, attacks upon Western history, anti-white propaganda, the trans nightmare, and all the rest of it. I've trotted off a list of cliches, but they're all vitally important as to why Trump has been successful. If you don't like Trump, look at the causes of Trump. Personally, let's see what he does over the next 4 years. Maybe America does deserve Trump, and we deserve Nigel. Blame yourselves. And there it is, really, in a nutshell. And I know many people are resisting that comparison. No, you can't blame, and in fact, Matthew Paris's column centres very much on that. You can't just blame, liberals for joining up with a man who he calls a slob, a cheat, a bully, and a liar. No, you don't just join the other side because of that. Well, to be honest, Matthew, I think you've missed the point there. That's absolutely what does happen. Now, the proof of all of this will be in the eating. We will clearly see maybe within a few months. We know he's going to sign executive orders. We will be able to ascertain quite soon on whether in fact, it wasn't just mood music, the absolute unequivocal, focused ideas of what Trump found to be bonkers, which most of us tend to be bonkers, whether that is enacted and whether there's a manifestation of that being enacted. The one I think is going to struggle on is illegal immigration. I think there's a sort of a belief out there that he's just going to get rid of all immigrants that have come. That ain't going to happen, by the way, and I think some Americans might be in for a shock. But he will be stricter on immigration. It's hard to not be stricter after Biden let, 8-9 million people in over a 4-year period. So there it is. Is Trump going to change the what? That's the bit that's interesting. We know what he's going to do in America, and whether he succeeds or not remains to be seen. But we certainly know what he means and what his mood music is. And how different is that to our politicians? You think we had Rishi Sunak versus Keir Starmer. Did anyone with a straight face go, I really know what these guys stand for? Yeah, there's a solid philosophy that you can back up. It's tangible. You can see it glowing around them. We didn't have any of that. None whatsoever. There's no sense of this is what they stand for. What is Starmerism, for goodness sake? What is Badenockism at the moment? I mean, she's paving her way. These are tricky times. We know what Trump stands for. But is he going to change the world? That is really the crucial question here. Because fine, if America do things they hadn't done before or revert to form of things they hadn't done before. But whether it affects the rest of the world is crucial. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. Let's get a word on this. And the other big stories of the day. Charlie Rowley, political commentator, is with us. Afternoon to you, Charlie.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Always good to have you with us. It is a big day, of course. Donald Trump is ready in the wings, waiting to go. 47th President of the United States will be sworn in at 4:47. I like the way they time that. Good luck on the person that has to slow down or speed up, whatever it is they're saying at that point, and get it bang on. But we know he's going to start with a bang, really, taking office. 100 executive orders expected to be signed in the first few days. He vows to change every radical, foolish executive order of the Biden administration. Let's have a listen to what Mr. Trump said just yesterday.
Oh, you're going to have a lot of fun watching television tomorrow. Somebody said yesterday, sir, don't sign so many in one day. Let's do it over a period of weeks. I said, like hell, we're going to do it over weeks. We're going to sign them at the beginning.
There it is. Like hell, we're going to do it. There he is, Charlie. And we were just, I don't know whether you read the Matthew Paris column, but it kind of really reflects a big body of feeling of some people. You know, this man is a cheat, he's a buffoon, he's a liar, he's a criminal, all of this. But if you take the person out of it and just look at the policies, the kind of mood music around and the direction of travel of Donald Trump, it's not hard to see why this man got elected.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And I haven't read Matthew's column this week yet, but I will after this. But I also think even if you put the man back into it, and even if all of those things are true, you've got to try and make people like Matthew and actor Brian Cox, who I saw on another broadcast round this morning, who effectively just said, he couldn't work out why women would vote for Donald Trump. They just don't get it. And I thought, you've got to understand, however patronising that is, even if you don't like Donald Trump, even if you can't stand the man, and you're coming from that particular point of view, what you've got to do is ask those people to understand, or ask, why can't you understand why things have been so bad in America? That's why people have voted for Donald Trump again. Yeah. And when you see the international climate, the world needs somebody like Donald Trump to tackle the issues that we're all facing, whether it's confronting Vladimir Putin, whether it's getting involved in the Middle East, where we're seeing the great news of the ceasefire there. This man in his first term did a lot on the international stage, for good or for ill, but at least he made waves. And I think most people in history will look kinder on Donald Trump than some of his critics.
Will he change the world, do you think, Charlie? Because, I mean, there is, certainly a suggestion, and I've heard it said by a number of commentators today, that he should be or could be in line for a Nobel Peace Prize later this year.
Well, I think, yes, I've heard that too. I don't know how they mark the homework of people who are putting themselves forward for it. But I mean, there's, to say on your first day in office, if there isn't a ceasefire, particularly when we're talking about Palestine and Gaza, the Hamas and Gaza in the Middle East, they'll be held to pay if those hostages aren't released. Well, they've been released moments before Donald Trump has come in. So, now whether threatening to unleash hell on these two different groups, I'm not sure whether that qualifies you for a Nobel Peace Prize, but at least you see changes happen. In his first term, he was the first, I think, American president to visit North Korea.
Yeah.
These are things that never been done before. When it came close to home, NATO challenging France, Germany, the UK
100%.
to spend 2% on our GDP because America can't pay for all of our defence. Absolutely right. But of course, everybody got into a massive panic about that across Europe, particularly our European friends, because they'd never experienced somebody as an actual negotiator, as an actual businessman before. It's probably all been very nicey diplomacy. And a metropolitan elitist politics. We now have someone at the helm that knows what he wants to do, says what he's going to do, and he's actually going to get on and do it.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because there was the great bit of footage, wasn't there, with Angela Merkel. He was actually telling her, you guys don't pay enough. You never see that. You never see everything. Whenever there's a press conference or two leaders together, everybody is nicey, and they're all pals, and it's all smiles, and they say, well, we had a very frank conversation. You get it in a press conference. You never see somebody say, look, I'm sorry, Angela, you ain't pulling your weight on this one, mate, so you've got to pay more. And that's essentially what Trump did. And it's for those sort of reasons, that level of, some people would struggle to use the word honest when you're talking about senior politicians, but it's that absolute sort of almost brutal way of advancing what you're looking for, what you want, what you believe, that is the part of the attraction of Donald Trump.
Absolutely. He's very matter of fact. He's very direct. Whether what he says is sometimes a bit of bluster, a bit of the showman coming through. But I think, that's part of the package that everybody accepts with Donald Trump. But when I think it comes to the actual decision-making and the hard decision-making and the facts, he will look you square in the eye. And as you say, you either need to pay more or it's a deal or no deal. And if you don't want it, fine, don't worry. He'll make other deals elsewhere. He won't hold America back because he's got the confidence enough in himself, in his own abilities, and obviously has the confidence of quite a lot of Americans.
Is Donald Trump going to change the world? We watch with interest. Let's move to the other big story around over the weekend, the ceasefire that came into effect yesterday in Gaza. 3 hostages released from the hands of Hamas. Let's have a listen to what David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, said in a statement in the House of Commons just last week.
33 of the hostages will be freed: children, women, those over 50 and the wounded. Israel will start to redeploy to the edge of the Strip. Palestinians will return to what is left of their homes. The Rafah crossing will reopen. Israel will allow 600 truckloads of aid into Gaza each day. And on the 16th day, negotiations will begin on the detail of the second phase.
Well, that's the Foreign Secretary. We're hopeful, of course, as the only thing we can be really, Charlie, that this does begin the process that continues in this way and then results in something more permanent. But I don't think anybody, when we're dealing with this region and this area and this particular battle, when you're up against essentially a terrorist group, I don't think anybody says that lightly.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Obviously, wonderful scenes to watch yesterday as hostages were released, including a British national. And so the whole process is broken up into, I think it's 3 phases. So this is phase 1. So hopefully that paves the way for a smooth and successful sort of transfer of those other hostages in the next phases to come. But I think it will become more difficult. Tensions are always high, and therefore it's maintaining that peace and stability and maintaining that transition of hostages and prisoners that are being released, obviously, from Israel back to Palestine. Then you've got to hope that it holds up. And when you're seeing, just in relation to the transfer, obviously in American politics, so Trump coming in, you can only hope that his watchful eye over the situation will make sure that those peaceful phases are achieved.
Charlie, stay with us. We're going to talk Southport and the guilty pleas to murder that have been happening in court earlier. Details on that. And the benefits system in this country incentivises workers to say they are sick, according to one senior peer from the House of Lords. More on that on the way. Everything you need to know. And that question, is Donald Trump going to change the world? I mean, a serious question. Everyone thinks they'd like to change the world, but really, will this man change the shape, the direction of our world? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 22 minutes after 1. Charlie Rowley, political commentator, is with us, looking at the big stories of the day. And, of course, breaking in just the last couple of hours, the Southport killer, as we can now refer to him, Axel Rudabukubana, 18, pleading guilty to the murders of 3 girls at that dance class. This has clearly saved the family, the horror, Charlie, of listening to perhaps even more disturbing detail, or hearing the words, or the justification or a defence, if you like, of murder. They haven't got to go through that. It does certainly speed this process up. He'll be sentenced on Thursday, but nonetheless, none of that can ever remove the sheer levels of horror that were witnessed and experienced on that day.
That's right, and I think it was expected to be around about a 4-week trial, and where there would have been a defence. You're absolutely right, where the families would have to relive the horrors, the descriptions, of what happened on that fateful day. Obviously, the country and the world's media, certainly the national media, would be gripped by the story, will be reporting on it, which will obviously have implications in the way in which this whole tragedy sparked riots in the summer across our country. So there'll be lots of people reliving that day for lots of different reasons. And I think it's absolutely right that, as I say, what was expected to be around about a 4-week trial will now see this evil creature convicted and sentenced on Thursday.
Yeah, he further pleaded guilty to producing ricin and possessing an Al-Qaeda training manual found during the search of his home. Although I think I'm still right in saying that the charge against him was not one of terrorism, it was of murder. In that respect, he refused to stand or confirm his name when this case began at Liverpool Crown Court. But the judge, Justice Goose, has ordered him to be sentenced on Thursday. In the last few moments, we've just got this through from the CPS prosecutor, Ursula Doyle, speaking outside Liverpool Crown Court.
I'm deeply grateful that today's plea has spared the families at the heart of the case the pain of having to relive their ordeal through a trial. Today, our thoughts are with all those whose lives were altered by what happened on that day. Most of all, we think of Elsie, of Bibi and of Alice, the 3 beautiful young girls whose lives were cut short, and wish strength and courage to their families who loved and cherished them.
That's the CPS talking outside the court. And interesting, Charlie, I mentioned it there. I know that, the conspiracy theorists online do tend to go rather wild with this. I remember it was only like a week or so ago when people were, or in fact leading up to this case, I can't believe this man is pleading not guilty. Now he's pled guilty to this. Many are then saying, so we don't ever get to see the detail of the trial and all the strange things that are going on behind the scenes. I don't know how you answer somebody who's going to make that point, really. I mean, I think it's, thankfully, the guilty plea is the right plea. I mean, it would have been pretty hard for anybody to defend him and get him off those sort of charges. I know that's the way our system works. It's for a defence lawyer to point out so that the prosecution make sure their case is thorough and intelligent and reasonable and all the rest of it. I get it. But it has, as the CPS there said, it has spared the family having to relive all of this. This could have been an 8-week case. The details would have been absolutely horrific, and whilst we know what happened, when you see it detailed in a courtroom, in the sort of clinical setting of a courtroom, you hear lawyers defending somebody who's been responsible for this. I would imagine that would have been pretty hard for some of those families to sit and listen to.
Definitely, and there was a report that I think this particular individual had some sort of mental health issues, that he hadn't spoken to his family for a long time, and any kind of justification or defence to try and minimise what was obviously the most brutal of crimes, entering in a young girl's dance class, dancing where they should have been over the summer, celebrating having the time of their lives, and those lives were cruelly taken away from them. Nobody wants to hear that again. I mean, for those conspiracy theorists, as you mentioned just there, hopefully the judge, I think, will read out, their opinion on the case. They will obviously issue, hopefully, a life sentence. I think it'll be hard.
Yes, it will certainly be that. It's just down to what the minimum term is. But I think we're looking in, the sort of mid-40s in terms of years for something like this. Let's just finally change gear slightly here, Charlie. A House of Lords report has revealed that people eligible to claim health-related benefits could double their income by leaving work. Have a listen to a clip here from Fraser Nelson's documentary on the benefit problem overtaking this country.
So you're working part-time now and you're getting long-term sickness benefits. So what's the combination of those two compared to when you're working full-time with no benefits?
It's no different. So I'm probably working half the hours for the same money.
Right. So there's no financial incentive for you to get out of a situation at all?
None at all. None at all.
So why are you here? Why are you talking to me?
Because I wanted to highlight how bad things are.
So there it is. He's highlighted how bad things are there, Charlie, by saying essentially they're giving me too much money. I don't know what to do with it. So, but it has always been a problem, right, over there at the DWP and elsewhere, that how do you make work pay, as it were?
Well, it was almost for a second there as if that chap was in the room with us, Ian.
Yeah, I gave it a good go, Charlie. I gave it a good go.
But you're right. What is so frustrating about this story is that it seems like it's nothing new. You know, everyone you talk to every other day, you know, we all know that sometimes, you know, that work doesn't pay. The benefit system allows people to not have that incentive to go to work. And when you hear that the benefits bill is bigger than the police, the court system, and I think our own defence budget combined, or certainly would be, but that is outrageous.
I mean, it's beyond belief, isn't it? It should never be that, and it was never intended to be that. And then, of course, I suppose, you know, victims of our own success, you put a system in place and then you realise, right, well, the system addresses this problem but not that problem, so we add another part of the system. And then, before anybody realises, since the 40s, when the welfare system was developed, we've grown this sort of Frankenstein monster, monolithic, out of control system that nobody can seem to stop. It's a triffid out there.
And that's absolutely right. And I read somewhere this morning, I think this summed it up perfectly, that, you know, we're becoming a welfare state with an economy just on the side. And it should be the other way around. You know, you should have a growing economy to allow you to have a welfare state on the side, which obviously, you know, you give benefits and people that need it the most.
Spot on. Charlie, listen, we hit the clock, but as ever, thank you. Enjoy the inauguration. I know you're going to be watching. We've got a lot to come. We're going to talk to Jason Meister, former Trump advisory board member, in a few moments. Also with us, Malcolm Nance, former US Navy intelligence officer, and Greg Swenson, big friend of the station, of course, chair of Republicans overseas. He's in the United States for the inauguration. All of those guys on the way. Plus, over to you as well. Is Donald Trump going to change the world? I'm interested. Your views, please. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Just gone 1:30 here on Talk. This one from Tad, who says no leader is going to enjoy universal popularity, but the big job takes a big ego. Just think back to the humiliation meted out to the hapless Mrs. May by her friends in the European Union. Can anyone seriously envisage Donald Trump being disrespected in quite the same way? That's a good point as well. Thank you to Bob as well in Glasgow, enjoying the show. And like the monologue at the beginning, Trump oozes common sense. He will make the USA and the Western world, and that's the bit that's interesting here, a better place. To see everything bad about Biden's beliefs and motivations, just look at Starmer. Detesters are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Trumpism is Farageism. The future is looking brighter today, says Bob in Glasgow. Well, it's not going to be very long now that Donald Trump does become the 47th president. Events to mark that inauguration are underway in Washington, D.C. He's first attending a church service with his wife ahead of being sworn in officially at 4:47 UK time. 47 minutes past, reflecting the 47th president. I didn't even know that happened. But apparently so. Trump's promising to immediately undo what he calls the destructive actions of Joe Biden within the first few hours of taking office. Let's speak with Jason Meister, former Trump Advisory Board member in Washington, D.C. Jason, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Nice to have you with us, sir. So where are we on this then? I mean, here's a man that, of course, he's been there before. I think he's only the second time somebody's come back in this kind of way to take the highest office. And, I mean, this guy's going to hit the ground running, right? I mean, no messing around, he says. I'm going to get those executive orders sorted. They'll be signed possibly within hours of becoming the president.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, being here in Washington, D.C. for this inauguration, the energy and the excitement is palpable. Look, this is after a decade of witch hunts. They tried to bankrupt him. They raided his private residence in Mar-a-Lago, the lawfare from New York to Georgia, the hoax after hoax. And this is the greatest political comeback in American history, maybe even in world history. And I think, to your point, the country is going to turn around in 180 degrees from day one. And this is a president that understands the mistakes that were made in his first term. He's going to hit the ground running with a slew of executive orders reversing everything that Joe Biden has done to this country. And look, we have restored free speech. We've broken the Overton window, and we have enabled the second American Revolution.
And is that, I mean, that's a very interesting way of putting it, Jason. Is that the real sense, that this is almost a revolution?
Yeah, look, the corrupt establishment of both parties, Democrat and Republican, gave birth to MAGA, to the MAGA movement, to the populist Donald Trump movement. Without the corruption in the United States, you would not have a Donald Trump presidency. You would have had 4 years of Donald Trump and he would have gone away. But the corruption, the stolen election in 2020, which is now beyond a reasonable doubt in any American's mind. And now, on top of all that, in this last minute, we see these pardons of Dr. Fauci, of the J6 committee, of Mark Milley. These are admissions of incredible guilt. You don't preemptively blanket pardon innocent people. And the fact that these pardons come right moments before Donald Trump takes the oath of office, to me, is a clear admission of guilt. Mark Milley with treason, the J6 committee with obstruction of justice, and Dr. Fauci committed genocide, crimes against humanity. To me, the most egregious of all these pardons is Dr. Fauci, the cover-up of COVID that killed potentially 20 million people across this globe. It was a bioweapon that was funded by NIH and Dr. Fauci. And now all of the American people, at least in the court of public opinion, know that these were crimes against humanity.
I mean, a lot of people would say, come on, Jason, you're a bright guy. That's a lot of conspiratorial stuff there. Where's your tinfoil hat?
Look, the conspiracies of 6 months ago are the realities of today. Yesterday's misinformation is today's truth. And that's unfortunately the reality we live in. And that's why it was so important to restore freedom of speech. I give a lot of credit to Elon Musk for restoring freedom of speech and restoring that speech to the modern public square that is in X. And that's the difference, I think, in the postmortem of the 2024 election, is that the average American citizen with a smartphone and a social media account broke the back of the commercial mainstream media. If you were watching CNN or MSNBC or reading the New York Times or the Washington Post, you were completely on another planet. And you probably woke up on November 6th and realized that you were getting misinformation and disinformation from the mainstream media. And perhaps you should have been listening to those that were around you that understood the truth of what was happening in this country. And I think that's really the reality of what happened in this last election cycle.
Yeah, and that's an interesting analytical point to finish on. Jason, thank you for your time, sir. Enjoy the day. I know you will. He's in Washington, D.C., former Trump Advisory Board member. Let's speak with Malcolm Nance, former U.S. Navy intelligence officer, author of the book, The Plot to Betray America. Malcolm is in New York, where all the action happens. Have you got a front row seat, Malcolm? Good afternoon to you.
I certainly don't have a front row seat to what's going to happen down in Washington today.
Yeah.
Who would want to see this disaster?
Well, I was about to say, I don't imagine you'd want a front row seat.
No, certainly not. And, listening to the palaver that you just got from the former Trump advisor shows that these people don't live on any plane of reality that the American people live on. Let me get something straight for your listeners. Donald Trump was elected by 31% of the electorate. Kamala Harris got 30.5% of the electorate. He got only 2 million more votes than he had in 2020. And what broke this was that 6 million people didn't come out to vote. So that doesn't mean that it's a mandate. 50% of the American voting republic didn't vote. So there is no mandate here.
He still won, Malcolm, didn't he? I mean, he needed 270 to cross the line. He got what, 312 or something? I mean, that's convincing.
If he wins by one vote, this is the American way of government. Look,
so he won. You recognise he won and he's the president.
Of course he won, but that does not mean that he represents 2/3 of the American public. He doesn't even represent a small minority. He represents a plurality of those who voted. Half of America didn't vote. So this talk of Donald Trump changing back everything Joe Biden did over the last 4 years, legislation doesn't work like that. Only people who believe in dictatorship, in which he's just going to sign and change laws, which have been enacted by our legislative branch. Look, 249 years ago, we separated ourselves from Great Britain by shutting off a king. And as the Declaration of Independence itself said, any man who fancies himself, or any prince who fancies himself as a ruler through fiat and dictate is just a tyrant and has no right to rule a free people. This was not an election in which Donald Trump won 50% or 60% or 70% of the public. He did not. What he won was the Electoral College, a system that barely gives him the opportunity to have representation. So for him to come and say that he is going to fundamentally change America means that he is going to rule by dictate.
But he is allowed. But the point is, Malcolm, and if he's going to apparently sign these executive orders very quickly, he's allowed to do that. That's part of the deal, right? That's part of the job. Joe Biden has just been issuing pardons for some people who are accused of high crimes.
Holy cow, if you look at Donald Trump's pardons, he pardoned people that were convicted of fraud, major felonies. Steve Bannon stole money and he gave him a pardon. Roger Stone created the entire Stop the Steal fantasy and he gave him a pardon. The Donald Trump administration right now is essentially a continuing criminal enterprise. He had the most corruption of any president since the 1860s. Joe Biden had not one person indicted, charged, even though they were extensively investigated for 4 years. So, I mean, we can live this out. They can create an alternate reality, but it's going to come crashing down into the reality that we are a nation of laws. We are a nation with checks and balances. But Donald Trump and the Republican MAGA, I'm afraid that they think they are going to rule over America, not govern America. And we already saw that they don't know how to govern.
Do you sense, though, Malcolm, that Because I'm intrigued. We have similar dilemmas in this country. We've got a pretty weak government who got a lot of votes, but not a great share of the vote, etc. We have some very robust opposition coming in the form of Nigel Farage, a name I'm sure you are now familiar with. It would have been unthinkable that Americans would have even known a leader of a party that has just 5 MPs in it, but we live in different times and all the rest of it. There is a sense that the world has gone a bit upside down. So we can talk about the personalities, we can talk about whether Mr. Trump's win was as convincing as it first looks and all the rest of it. There is an irredeemable narrative, is there not, though, at the moment, Malcolm, underpinning the Western world. You think of things like the gender madness, you think of DEI, you think of pronouns and all that goes with it. And they on their own may not be game-changing in the sense that we're about to get invaded by North Korea, but they symbolise a kind of change in the direction in which we all exist. They are symbolic of a kind of upside-down mayhem that appears to have infested democracies across the globe. That's why Donald Trump is riding high.
And you use a very good word there, infested. I think the most successful book that I wrote that was a Times bestseller was called The Plot to Destroy Democracy, starting with how Putin was using his cyber spies to change what we call the global meta-narrative. That is just the image that liberal democracy or liberal, parliamentarian democracy and it is weak and needs to be disassembled and replaced with an authoritarian fascism led by oligarchs. Donald Trump was his avatar. He backed Trump. So for the last 10 years, look at your own country, not starting with the Russian support of the Scottish referendum, Brexit, trying to get the Catalonians to secede, trying to get California and Texas to secede. You see an information warfare operation to tear down the system of democracy that has upheld the West since Normandy landings, where we paid for the democracy in blood. And let me tell you something, as an intelligence professional, all of this is very clear for us to see. And it is an insult for us to think that money and oligarchy should fund fascism, which is what Elon Musk is doing. Look, he dissed Nigel Farage, and he's backing Tommy Robinson, of all people, as the person he thinks is the avatar for Britain. You have issues, we have issues. You have a weak government sometimes, we have a weak government sometimes. But to rip down the foundation of global democracy and the view that that should be replaced with money and oligarchy will lead to instability, chaos, and mayhem.
But listen, but Biden, look, take immigration as an obvious example. What, okay. 10 million people suddenly hop over the border under the Biden administration, almost waved in under Sleepy Joe. He didn't even notice what was going on. In you come, guys. We don't care where you're from. This is how we are. This is part and parcel of that new way of liberal thinking. Trump's come along and said, BS. No, that ain't happening. Not under my watch.
You know, I call this house here, I've testified before Congress in this very seat 3 times. I call this house the House of Facts. Joe Biden and Barack Obama had the 2 largest breaks and suppression of illegal immigrants in history. It is a freaking lie that Donald Trump had the greatest immigration policy. He, in fact, had the largest waves of immigrants coming into the United States because
he didn't do good on deportations, but he didn't have 8 million people, Malcolm. He didn't have 8 million people that crossed the border in his time. Biden has made Trump look like an amateur in that respect. Come on, you know that much.
Listen. The United States is, if you're not a Native American, you're an illegal immigrant into this country, with the exception of African Americans. We came as hostages. Every person who has been in this country from Alexander Hamilton all the way, to the founding of the United States, were immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. It is literally written in the Statue of Liberty. So to start this campaign...
Well, that doesn't mean anybody, does it? That doesn't just mean anybody that can just hop over the border.
Campaign against the people who pick our food, the people who take care of their children and nannies, the people who actually construct most of the housing in the United States, and to say that you're going to take on a 1930s-like mass roundup and deportation of people who, by the way, pay 30% of their salaries in taxes but get zero of the benefits of the Constitution of the United States other than freedom of speech and the Fourth and Fifth Amendments of the United States is mind-boggling.
All right, well...
Let me tell you, again, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I walked the streets of where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were written, and this is an anathema to what American citizens should tolerate. Donald Trump, he needs to watch his step. If he's going to rule over us, well, you want to see a second American Revolution? It won't look like the MAGA Truth Social version of it.
Well, Malcolm, in 4 years' time, you might be campaigning for him. I don't know. You might prove you wrong. You could end up with this incredible system that you could only have dreamt of. Listen, Malcolm, I've got to step in there. Malcolm Nance, former US Navy intelligence officer. I think we can put him down as an undecided when it comes to the next election. His views on that. Your response as well. Is Donald Trump going to change the world? We're going to speak to Greg Swenson shortly. He's over there in Washington for the inauguration. Details coming next, right here on Talk.
He is going to drill numerous executive orders regarding basically getting more cheap, reliable energy. My God, we need more of that. Ending all the electric vehicle mandates for the net zero policies, because no one wants to buy these cars and they're all made in China anyway. Ending what he calls the transgender lunacy. He says, with a stroke of my pen on day one. So basically, absolute nonsense. The US government will recognise only two genders, because there are only two genders.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is talk.
Peter says the Trump president cannot do anything worse than our government. I wish him well, and I hope our government leaders learned a few lessons as well, says Peter. It's going to be an interesting time, isn't it? We've got the events starting already. We know that as we speak, Donald and Melania Trump arriving at a church service as the day and the events begin. There's going to be a lot to go on over the next few hours as well. After that church service, of course, it then gets into the detail, and at 4:47 UK time this afternoon, 47 minutes past the hour, which is to reflect the 47th President of the United States, I should say. There he is. He's back in the White House. He's back in the Oval Office, and he's going to get one underway. He's going to hit the ground running. Let's speak with Greg Swenson, the chair of Republicans Overseas. He's in Washington, D.C. Good afternoon to you, Greg.
Hello, Ian. Good to see you.
And you too. Is there a real vibe? Is there a sense that you can feel not just a big day for any American when a new president is sworn in, but is this a real sense of change?
Yeah, it's really different than other inaugurations, Ian. There's such an electric feeling here of optimism. And it's not just for the inauguration day. It's just a general sense of optimism that, you know, many people view it as getting their country back in one respect, but also just economic optimism that the sort of the Biden administration was so hostile to the private sector. Wages are down 4% since Biden took office. So there's just a real great feeling about the return of sanity and common sense.
Sanity and common sense seems to be absolutely central to what is being talked about in terms of this incoming president. A very real feeling that under Biden, like a lot of other Western leaders, he doesn't stand alone. He's not in isolation with this kind of slightly wacky way of viewing the world. But he certainly took it to very high-profile levels. He was, after all, the president. All of that is going to go, apparently. The gender madness, the pronouns, men playing women's sport, DEI, all of that stuff that everyone with a brain says, this is nonsense. Trump's going to deal with that early doors, we understand.
Absolutely. You're going to see it day one in the executive actions where DEI will essentially be removed from the government. And it's already started in the private sector. You're seeing even big woke banks like HSBC, like Citibank, they're all taking, you know, DEI off of their platforms. And it's a great sign. And you also see that with the ESG movement. I think you've already seen pullback from that, but I think you'll see a lot of, again, common sense return to the economy and to the nation in general.
Yeah. Do you think this will be noticeable? Because there's the problem with all politicians of whatever colour, Greg, you know, they talk the talk, they make a lot of promises. And then, of course, you know, after the excitement, when it's all died down, it's like, OK, right, let's see some action. You need to feel it, a tangible nature that your man or woman has delivered. Will we get a sense of that quite quickly with Trump?
I think we will. Again, the executive actions will happen today, and you'll see that, you know, for example, the border is something that executive actions can really address. And Biden did it on day one. He basically opened the border, so it led to, you know, a crisis in human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug and basically, you know, everything that happened at the border was because of Biden's executive actions. You'll see a massive reversal of all of those today. And so that's something that can happen quickly. Some of the economic issues, like extending the 2017 tax cuts, that will take some time. Obviously, you've got to go through Congress, and that might take time. Hopefully, by the summer, you'll see some big wins. But a lot of it can happen quickly, and it's also just the general attitude of knowing that sanity is returning. That optimism permeates the economic issues, and so I think you'll see a lot of response and a lot of anticipation.
And in terms of what has been left behind, Biden has gone, Trump's in. Naturally, they've had a couple of meetings and shaken hands and acted sort of with dignity. But it's not going to take. I mean, it's already started, but it won't take long before that. Mr. Trump is really not going to have any great things to say about the previous administration. I don't imagine him saying, "Oh, I'll just keep that policy there because that looked rather good."
No, and you saw that in his speech yesterday at the rally. You know, he's quite critical for all the right reasons of the Biden administration, and so much of that was destructive. And this is one of the many reasons why President Trump was reelected, you know, by very considerable margins. So I think you'll see a lot of criticism of Biden. Right now he's bitter, he's angry. It's reflected in some of the comments you've seen or heard from President Biden, and also from his wife, Dr. Jill Biden. So, you know, that there's not a lot of love lost between the Trumps and the Bidens, but more importantly, it's that friction in the Democrats right now. You saw that coldness between Jill Biden and Kamala, you know, at Jimmy Carter's funeral, for example. So I think the criticisms of Biden have already started. They've been around for a long time, but I think history will not be kind to Biden. I would argue he worse than Jimmy Carter. Comparisons between the two are probably an insult to Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Greg, enjoy the day, enjoy the afternoon, enjoy 4:47, which is when Mr. Trump becomes the 47th President of the United States. He was Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas in Washington, D.C. for the big day. Elsa says, what a joke your American guest was, worrying about democracy or a lack of it under Trump. Is he okay with Biden's lies, corruption and evil woke ideology? Obviously, it seems. Only 2 words to say to him: sour grapes. Leftists are full of bile and venom for others, but never look in the mirror. I think you're spot on with that. Thank you. More where that came from: 0344 499 1000. Is Donald Trump literally going to change the world? Thoughts on that all coming up on the other side of the news at 2.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
3 minutes after 2, not 2 minutes after 3, by the way. It's definitely 3 minutes after 2 o'clock right here at the home of Common Sense. Welcome back. Donald Trump promising to sign almost 100 executive orders, potentially around immigration and gender, some as soon as he's sworn in as the 47th president this afternoon, just a couple of hours away. The teenager accused of killing 3 girls in a knife attack at a dance class in Southport in July last year has pleaded guilty to their murders. That has cut short the court case as a result, sparing the family the horror of reliving and seeing somebody defended for what they have done. He'll be sentenced on Thursday this week. And the British-Israeli woman Emily Damari was among 3 hostages freed by Hamas after 15 months in captivity as part of the opening phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal. We'll have details on all of those stories and more from you as well. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Lots coming in from you as well. This one from Peter. The Trump president cannot do anything worse than our government. I wish him well and hope our government leaders learn a few lessons. It is interesting. I did see, I think it was Dan Hodges made a point that I thought was a good point. The amount of, because obviously Starmer has got this very curious relationship. Well, it has no relationship at the moment with Trump, but it appears that the direction of travel is not going to be great. I mean, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has said some pretty robust things against Trump. Apparently they've got that settled. You've got Sadiq Khan there as well. Mandelson, now the ambassador. I can't imagine. Imagine Trump and Mandelson sitting around a table. Oh, my God, he'd eat him for breakfast, wouldn't he? So I think there's some issues there. However, I don't want my government to fail. I don't want to enjoy... People, you're seeing people on social media, I cannot wait to watch Trump make mincemeat of Starmer. No, I don't want to see that. I don't. It might happen. I don't want to see it happen. Nobody should want to see it happen, even if you pathologically hate the ground that Labour walk on, and Keir Starmer to boot. Let's meet with Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home, on this and a few other big stories as well. Good afternoon to you, Alan. Nice to have you with us again.
Thank you very much. You too. Nice to be here.
It's a big day, of course, over there in the States. And, of course, you know, from our side of things, we are watching and waiting to see what a relationship, a new relationship, a special relationship, what that looks like. Keir Starmer obviously seeking a trade deal with the new US president. And we understand that there's been a new mini-cabinet formed to focus on getting that up and running. But, you know, there's a battle to be had there. I mean, they've not all been exactly gracious in the past towards the new president.
No, and I think it's become pretty, de rigueur to regurgitate these kind of disobliging things that they've been said. I actually don't necessarily think that is going to be an issue, really. I think Donald Trump has made up with, most famously, his vice president, J.D. Vance, saying extremely unkind things about him. So did Elon Musk, and they've managed to patch things up. I think Donald Trump, what he likes is kind of people to say sorry and kind of move on. He seems to, I think he almost likes that he's kind of got that over them, that they did say this thing and now they're having to sort of apologise and row back. So I don't think that's going to be the problem. I think something like the Chagos Island deal, I think that does represent a genuine issue, because I do think that there are interests, not just Trump, but kind of in the wider kind of Trump world, who are very angry about this potential deal and what it means with China, etc. So that, I think, could be quite a bit of a stumbling block. I think what you're going to see around trade is Jonathan Reynolds, the business minister, who's off to Davos with Rachel Reeves and others this week, has talked about the UK being seen as like a Goldilocks country, this idea that actually it's very open to free trade, but it has lots of kind of regulations in place to prevent it from being, from kind of it all kind of falling apart. And then that's where they're probably going to try and sell themselves. It's whether, Trump and his acolytes will see it quite the same way. We know obviously they are looking to put tariffs on, and whether the UK gets dragged into a lot of those tariff wars that Trump looks to want to get going from day one in his office.
Yeah, and obviously the to-do list as the new American president is already pretty vast. And although clearly as a Western democracy and as economically a very viable and, attractive despite all of our issues, the underpinning reality is that, we are a country that people do want to do business with. But nonetheless, I'm guessing we're not top of the to-do list at the moment over there in the Oval Office.
No, I think we kid ourselves a little bit. We talk about the special relationship. I mean, but I think it's a bit of a one-way thing in that sense. I think we talk a lot about America and what the presidency is going to do. I don't necessarily think that it's quite reciprocated over in Washington D.C. There are some pretty big competing priorities, not just, as I said, China, but obviously it's hugely close to Israel and everything that's going on there. We saw with the ceasefire and what's going to happen at the end of that ceasefire, and as those talks kind of continue with the war. There's obviously lots of other things that the American president's got to try and deal with, things like immigration and stuff he knows he wants to tackle straight away. So yeah, perhaps making nice with the new Star administration is perhaps not in the sort of top view of those kind of list of priorities.
Yeah. Well, it's clearly the tariff thing is the bit that we want to swerve if we can. But and I wonder whether Mr. Trump is really going to start slapping on these 5-10% tariffs all over the place. The smart money says you won't see that in those first batch of dockets that he signs off in the Oval Office.
No, I don't think they'll be straight off to the UK. He obviously has considerable business interests and kind of personal interests in the UK and in Scotland and stuff. And so I don't necessarily think that he's going to want to arbitrarily kind of slap those on. I think if we get into a tariff war, I think we're beyond no illusion that he would go there. He would go that far. I just don't think that's necessarily going to be the starting point. I think the UK has got a little bit of time, a little bit of wiggle room before we get to that point, I think.
And in terms of the United Kingdom's place against this new world, Donald Trump is sort of promising to turn it on its head. Let's get rid of all the DEI nonsense, the gender stuff, people in the government having to give themselves a pronoun. And some of that, quite a lot of that stuff, I think even, lefties are finding a bit irksome. It's a bit odd. That defines in many ways. I mean, pronouns will never be the top of the big political list, but just that word sort of defines a new world for many people that we're in, and a world that lots of people don't like. And Trump is the man that's going to change it. But of course, he's got to do much more than that. He's got to really deliver.
Yeah, and I think that UK finds itself in an interesting position there, because amongst a lot of those kind of Western liberal economies, there has been kind of a shift rightwards. We've seen those kind of more social democratic governments collapse in places like Canada. Obviously, we know that in Germany, Scholz is in trouble, Macron in France. We've seen the success of someone like Milei in Argentina and Meloni in Italy and all those kind of places. So in a sense, the UK electing a social democratic party with such a commanding majority has made us a bit of an outlier. And so therefore, I think that's why it's going to be difficult, I think, for Starmer and his party to kind of find their place amongst those kind of top countries. And I think that's what they've got to try and navigate. As I said, that kind of Goldilocks kind of thing. The part of what the UK is trying to do is trying to be that kind of bridge between the US and Europe. What they don't want to be essentially is get caught between those two and end up with kind of the worst of both worlds. And I think that's what the UK have got to try and sort out. And I think they've got to work out where they fit in with that Trump agenda that you just talked about.
One of the issues that even critics of Trump often say is that on foreign affairs, he did all right last time. Now, whether he did all right or whether it's a case of not a lot happened, I don't know, but nonetheless, I mean, there is some evidence that he went to places, I don't mean literally, but actually literally he did go to some places that other presidents hadn't done. And even to the right up to date today, people saying he could even get the Nobel Peace Prize this year. So, I mean, is this a man that or many people underestimate?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was the only one willing to go to North Korea and meet, Little Rocket Man, as he calls the leader over there. Yeah. But he went and had a big summit with Putin that obviously did not dissuade Putin from invading the Ukraine. And I think a lot of people are worried about whether Trump is what he's going to do with regards to ending. He's talked about ending the Ukraine war in a single day. What that means, I think people are a little bit worried about. I think more pressing, as I say, is what's going to happen in Gaza with that ceasefire coming to force, what's going to happen into that. But there are lots of other big global conflict concerns. I think the feeling was that first time round that he was still rather constrained by the kind of old Washington kind of niceties, that he had people around him who were trying to sort of mitigate a lot of his actions. I think that he understands that a lot better now and is trying to put people in place like Pete Hegseth in the military and that sort of stuff, and Marco Rubio at the state, who are going to be less likely to to mollify his more kind of tendencies, and actually it's more likely that he's going to be able to go a little bit more unchained in this second term round.
And the one thing he might do as well is overturn the TikTok ban, at least for a bit.
Yes, yeah. If you've been missing out on your videos of people dancing or cats and that sort of stuff,
haven't slept for a day.
No, I think it's interesting, and it was obviously really interesting that it's a classic example of kind of, in a sense, not him being lucky. I mean, people talk about the economy. He took over in a good economy in 2016. He's taken over an economy that actually, on a macro level, is doing really well under Biden. But obviously, people didn't feel it individually. But actually, he might take over that. And another, the TikTok ban is extremely unpopular in America, and then he gets to come in on day one and reverse something which is massively popular with young people. So it's sometimes people are kind of lucky generals. People get the kind of get the breaks as they come in. Yeah, he'll definitely chalk that up as a win, like he'll chalk everything else up as a personal win. He's a bit like my toddler. My toddler's always saying, "Oh, I found this all by myself," even though you got it out and put it out for them. And Trump's a little bit like that as well. Stuff gets put in his way, and then suddenly he sort of takes credit for it.
Yeah, well, we'll watch and see how the TikTok thing pans out. He's of course got a very close relationship with social media, so that might be interesting. Over here, Cabinet Secretary told to investigate Attorney General over a conflict of interest. This is Robert Jenrick calling for an investigation into the Attorney General's political conflicts. This is Lord Hermer. Of course, in the past, he's had clients like Jerry Adams. Now, it's a tricky one, isn't it, for a lawyer that goes into politics, because you will, by definition, have had previous clients. I don't know what the way around this one is, Alan, but I can see how it can become an uncomfortable look, and that's clearly where the government have ended up.
Yeah, it's a bit of it's a bit like they hired Tulip Siddiq to be this anti-corruption minister, knowing she had these links through her aunt to the government in Bangladesh, and it's a bit like they must have known when they plucked Harmer out of the legal sphere and made him appear to specifically bring him into to government to do this. They must have known at the time that he had these kind of this past, obviously, and all the clients that he did. And the moment they're hiding behind the kind of the convention, which is that government law officers do not disclose any advice that they give to ministers, or what kind of advice they give on what subjects. But as Robert Jenrick, who's written this letter to the Cabinet Secretary, points out, that's more to protect kind of the workings of government, not to kind of shield the law officers themselves from scrutiny. And I think there's going to be this continue to be on. I'm sure that most papers have got people working on this full time, going back through all the kind of cases that Harmer will have covered over the years, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come out of this. At some point they are going to have to make a statement on it. He can't continue to be silent on this and not kind of give an update as to what he's done. So I think this is definitely one that's going to run all this week and probably beyond as well. Yeah,
I think so too. Alan, thank you. Alan Solhurst is chief reporter at Politics Home with us on the programme. Over to you as well, 0344 499 1000. Maybe a bit of an overview. I mean, what happens in America, like any other elections? We don't tend to normally, France have an election, we don't bang on forever about the implications of the French election. There will be some, the world is a bit interlinked these days. But China is another example. But when a new American president comes in, we do have skin in the game. And when this particular president comes in, I think there's a whole raft of things that sort of accelerate our levels of interest. We can talk about DEI and gender and pronouns and immigration and all the rest of it. But I can't write this off. Our previous guest, Nutjob McDougall, that we had in the first hour, who was talking about, no, the founding fathers built, we're built on immigration. Well, yeah, right, that's fine. You can say, we're built on immigration. That doesn't then follow that the United States should have no view on excess immigration or too many people coming for the wrong reasons. It's not that kind of people who came to America, the founding fathers and those that made America great back then, did so because there were immigrants that were coming to build. There were immigrants that were coming to succeed. There were immigrants that were coming to mark out this new world and develop it and sell it and sing it from the rafters. That's a whole different thing from some shady fella jumping over the border saying, I think I've gone and done it. I've got over there. That's not quite. So you can't let them get away with that. And Biden did oversee mass immigration, the likes of which few, if any, previous administrations had ever seen. Carl's in Manchester on this point of Donald Trump. What are you making of it, Carl? Can he change the world?
Hello, Ian. Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Donald Trump. In response to your question, I don't think Donald Trump can change the world, but I'm hoping that he can have a massive impact with what he does and he says in the coming 4 years. I don't think 4 years is enough to be able to change the world. But what I do hope that he can point other people in the right direction to follow his way of thinking, and especially Mr. Vance. I'm hoping that he's in the same ilk as Donald Trump, and
as a man that will take over when he's gone.
Yes. And I'm sure if he thinks the same way as Donald Trump, he will be taking over in 4 years' time. So
and if the American economy is in good shape, there'll be no reason why he wouldn't be. Carl, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. One from Sam. I hope all Western country politicians who've fallen for the self-destructive extreme left policies see what's happened to Canada and how this has affected Trudeau's fall from grace. And then look at the USA, see how the people swing their voice and vote when their lives get affected so badly. Keep what you sow, Starmer. Yeah, or even reap. I guess you could keep as well. Thank you, Sam, for that. There's no doubt about it. Even if I don't like the word woke because I think it's been reversed engineered and it sounds like something, your mad old uncle would say at a wedding. All these wokies, there's a bit of that going on. It's political correctness gone mad. So it's sort of been hijacked by the other side and therefore become a bit meaningless. I've said forever, we need a new word for woke, really. I mean, there's lots of words you could have, but you probably can't broadcast them. But you kind of take the point. But even within that, even with those that aren't that fazed by the fact that, the world has changed or toilets have got to have different signs on them or all of that, there's no one out there that couldn't see some of the nuttiness that is happening out there in terms of who applies for jobs, and that's the DEI. I think we talked about that Westminster Council thing last week. I mean, this stuff would have just been illegal. I mean, people would have gone to jail for putting ads out like that not so long ago. And now it's like you can put an ad out like that with pride and go, yes, fantastic, right? Look, it's brilliant. We can do this. What kids learn in school, telling employers or employees that they have to use a pronoun, and even if they do want to, insisting that everyone else joins in with policing the language of the West. I mean, it's all of that old guff is the stuff that there's got Trump there. But actually, it's not all of that old guff that makes the world tick. So Trump has a massive job on his hands. Can he succeed? 0344 499 1000. 20 past 2, this is Talk.
he is going to drill numerous executive orders regarding basically getting more cheap, reliable energy. My God, we need more of that. Ending all the electric vehicle mandates for the net zero policies, because no one wants to buy these cars and they're all made in China anyway. Ending what he calls the transgender lunacy. He says, with a stroke of my pen on day one. So basically, absolute nonsense. The US government will recognise only two genders, because there are only two genders.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This from Steve, who says, we don't use the word woke in our house. We say don't be lammy. And I don't know whether that's about David Lammy or just lamb, because that sounds good. Lammy sounds like lame, and I like it. Don't be lammy. There's got to be a new word for woke, because it has been so spectacularly hijacked and used to get... So it's made to define kind of mad old gammons. That's how they've kind of reversed it. And I resent that, because there are areas of the I'll say it for the benefit of this, for the woke agenda, if you like Jordan Peterson and people like that, not everybody's cup of tea, but he's, spoken brilliantly on, he was the first guy, really, certainly as an academic, and possibly one of the first anywhere, that ever found himself up against this wall, this bizarre scenario of being pronouned because he wasn't buying it. Toronto University, there he was, head of psychology, the main man, much respected, and suddenly out of nowhere, 10 years ago, maybe more, this bizarre calling for his career to end because he wouldn't refer to somebody by their chosen pronouns. He wouldn't adopt this madness. Now, surely anyone can go... I mean, there are people who go, does it matter? Just call it... Well, yeah, it does matter. Stuff like that really matters. When you're trying to make the English language, you're trying to not just politicise it, racialise it, criminalise it, all of those things. Yeah, hell yeah, that matters. Sarah, down in London. How are you doing, Sarah?
Good afternoon. Happy Inauguration Day.
Indeed. Welcome along. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't see this working out between Stammer and Donald Trump. I'm from the U.S., as you can probably tell, and I've lived here for a few years. They're diametrically opposed to one another. The source of all of Donald Trump's problems, it isn't party political. The nature of the American duopoly is that it is meant to be adversarial. His problems come from a judiciary that is completely out of control, and his prosecutions are not just political, but they're intentionally personal. Alvin Bragg, who is the DA from New York, ran on a campaign of getting Trump. On what? He didn't particularly care. He just wanted to get Trump. Stammer's handling of Southport, of calling everyone who was upset far-right thugs, is going to read to Trump as the same type of behavior that he was on the receiving end of for 4 years.
Do you, I mean, bearing in mind what you said at the beginning is just a matter of fact, right? I mean, they couldn't be any more opposed. But, of course, Trump will have to deal with lots of countries where they have a different kind of thinking. So, in that respect, the UK wouldn't be so different from, many other European countries.
Well, there are many European countries, of course, that have political differences with the president. I don't think he particularly cares. I mean, he's a deal maker fundamentally. He's very pragmatic. What he fundamentally despises is the blob. It isn't politics. He will have no problem working with people with whom he has political differences. He proved that the first 4 years he was in office. Stammer is different. Trump has a personal connection to Britain. He sees himself as being an extension in some very real sense genetically of Scotland. He cares. enormously about the United Kingdom, and to see it in Stammer's hands is going to irk him in a way that it won't with China or with Russia or with any other potential political fallout.
But can it work? Because it might be, if you look at all the countries around the world that you just naturally have to do business with, the United Kingdom will be one of them. Or would Trump actually go so far as to say, these are the worst kind of politicians, and I hate these guys, and I will therefore make it hard for them? Would he do that if it meant, damaging our country?
I think he will treat the United Kingdom in the same way that he treats states that have an adversarial relationship with him, where their politicians have an adversarial relationship. He never has abandoned the American people. I don't think he will abandon the British people. But as for Stammer, he has already made it very clear. Nigel Farage is at his inauguration right now. Stammer was not invited. Trump will be choosing the people with whom he wishes to speak, and it will be hilarious if Stammer tries to push him. But it's a bit like a mailman trying to get a handshake from a Doberman pincer. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, great call. Sarah, thank you. Don't get a handshake from a Doberman pincer any day of the week. Sarah in London on Trump. I mean, I don't know where you take that, because I do want our government to succeed. I don't imagine for one second that even by Trump's sort of, he's very focused, and his mind exists in a very parochial, focused way. And if he ain't thinking it, he's not interested in anybody else telling him that stuff. And I know for many people that's a huge attraction, but like all powerful people, and he's kind of uber powerful, because not only does he have the role, but he gives that off. Those around him tend to adhere because he is he's a brash, very loudly, tough-talking New Yorker. That's how these guys roll. That's part and parcel of the vibe and the mojo of being from the Big Apple. And you're successful in business because you ride the wave in that kind of way. So despite all of that, and yeah, he would look at Stammer and say, who is this guy? Who are these people? They're not my people. But he would also know that he has to do business with other countries, and many around the world he's going to disagree with. Lash says, a new word for woke. Let's go retro and call it PC again. Remember that from the 90s? Yeah, it's PC. But because that got reversed engineered, didn't it? Political correctness gone mad. And then you had sort of comedians, correctly, like Stuart Lee, who's brilliant, kind of picking up that it's political correctness gone mad. And it then sounded a bit silly. So it sounded like you were the problem, even though you were just identifying political correctness. And I still see people online go, what actually is woke then? What's the opposite to woke? And then some half-brain, character who thinks they are bang on goes, yeah, the opposite to woke is racist. No, it ain't. Spoiler alert. I mean, the origins of woke go a whole different thing. It goes back. But that has changed. Like some common usage prevails, but meanings change, emphasis gets tilted and altered, and that's really what's happened with the word woke. And now it's just a super sensitivity to normal stuff. That's one way of putting it. So we could reverse engineer. I think being woke, let's just use that phrase for the time being, being woke needs to be as weird as being a drunk driver. That's the nearest I can get to it. If you are seen as one of those people that wants to put weird job ads in places and have all manner of strange insistences when it comes to pronouns at work and women's changing rooms and blokes with beards and penises playing on women's sporting. If you subscribe to all of that, you should be up there with drink drivers in terms of how you are perceived. So if we can crystallise that thought into a phrase or a sentence, I'm up for it. But maybe Lash is right. Maybe it's PC again. I don't know. Is that still tarnished? 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Of course, you'll miss nothing on the inauguration. I've just remembered, by the way, I noticed J.D. Vance and his partner are at the White House right now doing the vice presidential role. So Kamala Harris was there and her husband, one assumes, was there with... Kamala Harris was there with her husband, and then, of course, J.D. Vance shows up with his wife, and then you do this, oh, hello, we're taking over your job, thank you very much, show us where the vending machine is, and bye. Get out! I've just read that Trump's got to do that, hasn't he, with Biden yet? Did they not do it last time? There was something they didn't do, because I think Trump didn't do it. Yeah, I think Trump might have refused that bit. But I got a funny feeling Sleepy Joe will probably be wheeled out in order to face the music on that one. All of that's still to come. You'll miss nothing. Full inauguration. Everything you need to know covered right here on Talk. Jeremy Kyle following proceedings, of course, from 4 o'clock, and it's at 4:47 that he gets fully sworn in as the next American president. 25-3 now. Big news, of course, at the weekend. The release of hostages has begun. A British-Israeli woman was released by Hamas after 15 months in captivity, saying she's returned to life. This is 28-year-old Emily Damari. Was among 3 hostages released yesterday as part of that ceasefire deal. It saw 90 Palestinian prisoners freed as well. The first phase of the ceasefire, lasting 6 weeks, should see a total of 33 Israeli hostages held by Hamas exchanged for about 1,900 Palestinian prisoners and detainees from Gaza. The second phase will focus on freeing the remaining living hostages, while the third will recover the bodies of the deceased. Let's speak with Keith Fraser, founder of the Israel Solidarity Movement. Keith, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. For those uninitiated with this, what's with the disparity? 1,900 Palestinian prisoners, and I appreciate there's not as many Israeli hostages in totality, but nonetheless, I mean, one might assume that in exchange for that, every prisoner would be released, every hostage would be released straight away.
Of course, there is a big disparity, and I can only refer you back to another disparity when Gilad Shalit, who was in Hamas captivity for, I think, 5 years, something like that, and Israel, in its desperation to see freedom to its people, they released 1,000 prisoners in its jails, terrorists, convicted killers, one of them being Yahya Sinwar, who, as you know, was, until he was eliminated by the IDF recently, the leader of Hamas, and who orchestrated the abominable crimes on October the 7th. Yeah. It is a disparity, but it is reflective of the festering sore that is the hostages that remain in Hamas captivity. And Israel is very much a country that glorifies life, much to the opposite of their enemy that glorifies death, and it would do whatever it can to make sure that people are free and safe.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, we can talk about disparities and all sorts of other quirks and things we don't necessarily understand, Keith, or things that feel sort of wrong. And I suppose people who are professionals at dealing with these, or certainly across these kind of peace deals or ceasefires or whatever they happen to be in different parts of the world, they inevitably throw up these problems, right? There's lots about, I'm sure lots of people, when the IRA were brokering peace deals, couldn't quite believe that Martin McGuinness then became the Education Secretary, knowing what he'd previously done in his life. But that is the nature of stuff like this. Is that how we have to leave it?
Look, unfortunately, I've never been party to negotiations of captured hostages. I don't see a parallel with the IRA and Hamas. Hamas are a jihadist organization whose sole purpose is actually one of an Islamist ideology, killing Jews first because they're right next door, Christians next, including yourself, Ian, I'm afraid. So it's a very different ideology. Look, I've never been party to these negotiations. They're obviously very sensitive, and it has placed Israel in a very, very difficult position in which it wanted to completely eradicate Hamas. But of course, it's under a lot of pressure to free its hostages and free its people. And that's the choice I've had to make.
And is the problem, in a curious way, that some might perceive this, you sort of embolden Hamas. You put Hamas on an equivalent level when you carve out these kind of negotiations. And that in itself is a problem, because the idea that they're going away is certainly not going to happen. And even if they were, they're certainly not now.
Look, Ian, you know, people go on about all these different solutions in order to aid peace. There's only one thing that will aid peace, and that is re-education. You see, unfortunately, the Palestinian culture, I hate to say it, pretty much across the board is one which is pretty sick and depraved. Their textbooks, sick and depraved. Their imams' sermons, sick and depraved. Their TV stations, sick and depraved with incitement to violence. Now, until you have a situation where the children from birth are educated, those people are not going away, you don't have to like them, but we live next door and try and have a better life. Golda Meir said it many, many years ago, when the Arabs stop hating us more than they love their children, there will be peace. There is no other reason and no other option than the re-education and the de-radicalization. It's the only possibility. And yes, you're right, Ian. Unfortunately, Hamas have not gone away. Yes, they will recruit. Yes, the West is stupid insofar as they will keep giving aid to the Palestinians in Gaza, only for them to siphon it away on building terrorist tunnels, etc., etc. And we will see another cycle unless what I just highlighted to you changes.
We are in a phase mode now. I mean, this is very early doors. How does it feel to you, Keith? How does it instinctively look in terms of certainly what has been agreed will pan out and follow the chronology as has been set out in this agreement? Do you have confidence?
I have hope that the hostages come back. One of the hostages is a cousin of my wife who's been in captivity. He is one of the 33 who were on that list. No one knows whether he's alive or dead. And I can only imagine, in fact, I said to my wife yesterday, I said, when you see the families of the released hostages and their emotions, I almost felt sorry for the ones who haven't had that privilege for their family to come home yet. Because, of course, all they're doing is living in pain and anguish. Look, I want the hostages back. We want those people free. It is a festering sore in Israeli society. But at the same time, for the longer term, we want to see peace. Israel wants to live in peace. And unfortunately, when you have jihadists everywhere you look, left, right, north and or left, right, up and down, you've got jihadists everywhere, all funded, of course, by Iran. Until there is some sort of reformation, a re-education, you will only see violence continue, I'm afraid, Ian.
And that is, and that is the sad reality of all of this. We hope not, but you know, there's a sort of certain sense that we've seen a lot of this before. Keith, thank you for your time, sir, and I hope your wife's cousin is among those that are released very, very soon. Keith Fraser, founder of the Israel Solidarity Movement, with us on the programme. More comments coming in from you as well. Strummer says, the original meaning of the word woke was socially aware. This has changed into what we think it means as confirmed by YouGov. Woke people who love to change the meaning of words hate that, so let's stick to woke and annoy them. Although woke was originally a kind of sort of African-American thing. It was socially aware, but it was socially aware in the sense of issues that would be pertaining to that particular group. And then it took a bit of a turn, and it's described in one dictionary. I just this second looked it up. Having or marked by an active awareness of systemic injustices and prejudices. Now, you see, there starts the problem, doesn't it? Because who likes nobody likes an injustice, but it's what you see as an injustice, and if you view everything through the prism of your identity, and then you get this sort of identitarian underbelly, which becomes an overbelly of thought when it gets into academia, which is where a lot of this kind of stuff starts, and it continues and it festers and it's passed on, and then institutions sort of develop the whole thing as well. Yeah, we'll run with that. Yeah, you're right. Of course, your identity is, you can identify as whatever you like. Your identity is somehow important. And I don't, that's the bit to me that is, it's the most curious thing of it. I don't know why anybody thinks, I don't care what your identity is. I don't care what colour you are, what gender you are, what religion you are. I don't care. And the idea that you live your life by that. And then you get this thing called intersectionality, when you start to tick more than one box. So you could be, I mean, if you're I don't know, a black lesbian person in a wheelchair, man alive, you're riding high on the, those oppression chips are coming in big time. That's like being in Las Vegas and the machines going ping for about an hour. And that's how it sort of worked, because we based it. So that's just one facet to this. I think most people go, well, that's a bit weird, isn't it? That's a bit strange, bit of a weird way to do it. That doesn't mean to say you don't allow for certain things. Of course you do. Everybody knows you allow for stuff. But more than that, that's the sort of world that Donald Trump is claiming he's going to challenge and change. 0344 499 1000.
He is going to drill numerous executive orders regarding basically getting more cheap, reliable energy. My God, we need more of that. Ending all the electric vehicle mandates for the net zero policies, because no one wants to buy these cars and they're all made in China anyway. Ending what he calls the transgender lunacy. He says, with a stroke of my pen on day one. So basically, absolute nonsense. The US government will recognise only two genders, because there are only two genders.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. This from Paul. It's definitely a Blue Monday for Starmer and Lammy as they are blackballed from Washington. In fairness, I don't think any leader gets invited to the inauguration. Certainly not European. You might get. Would you get a Canadian? Maybe because you're part of that group. I don't know. But certainly no leader in recent times has gone to a presidential inauguration. It's a bit like, you know, you wouldn't have a president come over here while the new Prime Minister went to see the Queen or stood there in Downing Street accepting. It just doesn't happen. You do get the early visit. That's the interesting bit. Who gets invited first? And I think all eyes will be on that. But in fairness to, well, I don't want to say in fairness to Starmer, I don't like that phrase, but no one else is going. You know, Macron's not going, Scholz is not going. That's just the way it is over there at Inauguration Central. Unlike a funeral where they all tend to pile up for that. Sean's in Northampton on Trump. How you doing, Sean?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. What are your thoughts?
Firstly, I just want to say congratulations on trying to explain what woke means, because normal people like me and you will never understand it and can only be summed up as pathetic, in my view. But,
yes.
So well done for your effort on that.
Well, I gave it a go, Sean. You know, I'm not sure what success we've had there, but you know, it's on the record as the man that tried.
I think it's funny. One of the things that's not been really mentioned anywhere is that in my view, the world, even Trump in charge of it, is a much, much safer place now. So I genuinely believe that people like Putin and the Chinese and the Iranians, actually, I think they've got this, they live in awe of Trump, probably because they don't know what he's going to do, but secondly because they know he won't be pushed around.
Yep. And
I honestly heartfelt believe that had that other lady got in, that Harris wasn't it? Yeah. I believe if she got in, I think the Russians and the Chinese would have made a big push, either economically or through IT or even physically. I believe the world was really on the cusp of the Russian/Chinese axis making a move on Europe. Like I say, either an all-out warfare or just, you know, bringing us down economically or whatever. So I think that Trump, many people over here that laugh at him, I think they ought to feel a lot safer because he's going to make sure that NATO become NATO again, because in all fairness, it's so weak now, it can't do anything. I mean, Donald Trump could put one aircraft carrier to sea, and that would outnumber the total aircraft in the Royal Air Force, you know? Yeah. So, you know, he wants NATO to start being NATO. I think it's always been ally of ours, I think, to be honest with you. But I think so. People should stop looking at him. Yes, he can make a fool of himself, but at least he's got the guts to get out there and say what 99% of this world is saying, that we're sick to death of being told that men are women, that men can even get near a ladies' changing room, all that kind of stuff that all of us have been sitting here for 4 years listening to. Wanting to, you know,
they're the bits that most sane people would absolutely concur with, and the ones that wouldn't, who go, well, it's just not a problem for me, are those that are kind of almost too scared to think that if they do agree with the kind of non-woke thing, it somehow makes them a worse person when it really doesn't. Listen, Sean, I've got to move just to get more comments on. Great call. Thank you for that. Oh, by the way, it is the voice of doom. What day is this, Adam? Is it day 8 or is it day 9? 9. I love 9. We think it's like we don't know. We're in such a frenzy over this thing. So day 9, maybe, of the voice of doom. It's the political mystery voice. Who is this?
Give me hundreds of examples.
Any ideas? It's gone on for 9 days. Nobody knows. Normally we have a difficult one. It's a bit cryptic. Somebody nonetheless comes from the outside. They still get it. Not today, apparently. Here it is again.
Give me hundreds of examples.
Now, don't call in. There is no prize. You can message in 87222. The only clue I'm going to slightly give you here is this person has actually been mentioned on air in the last week. OK. That's all I can say. That's all I'm going to say. I think that's too generous, frankly. The name of this person has been referenced in the last week or so, here and elsewhere. Here's the voice again.
Give me hundreds of examples.
87222. If you think you know who it is, if we get a right answer, we will reveal all on the other side of the news. If we don't, it rolls over to day 10, which is 2. Have we done it 3 times so far, Sam? Have we done 3? We did do 3. We can't do 4. Oh, come on, let's do 4.
Give me hundreds of examples.
No, it's too many. Sorry. Can we
Give me hundreds of examples.
I tell you, it's a good job this show isn't live, isn't it? We can just cut all this stuff out, thank goodness. Let's go back to the calls. James is over here down in London. How you doing, James?
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good as gold, thank you. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank God, you know, the American people, you are so lucky. You are so lucky to have a leader, an actual leader, because this man's going to come in at 12 o'clock here, and he's going to ruin the Chacos Island deal. He's going to stop us handing across, you know, a strategic position in Ireland in the middle of the Indian Ocean across to the Chinese, because that's what will happen to it. And what's going to happen to our Prime Minister, Ian, and our Foreign Secretary? We're going to be made to look like absolute morons when he goes, that deal is not going through.
It's interesting, that deal, isn't it? Because it was already, as I'm sure you know, James, the Tories already had it up and running, to penciled in to go. You'd have thought that Labour could have really stolen a march on this and gone, do you know what? No, we'll do the very opposite to what people will think we will do, but then they kind of made it even worse.
But what should be done, Ian, because they want to hand it across and pay for it, so why don't we just hand it across to the Americans? Just give it to the Americans. It's going to save the taxpayer millions and millions.
That's a good idea. Give it to the Americans. They'll think, hey, those British guys are good after all. Starmer isn't such a numpty. He can do. I like that. Good thinking. James, great call. Thank you for that. Donald Trump is now at the White House. He has met with Joe Biden and Jill, Dr. Jill, Melania. They've all kind of pitched up for a bit of a powwow. They've gone off, we understand, for an iced fancy and a cup of tea, which is what you do at those kind of events. And then, of course, the build-up, which is about an hour and maybe just shy of 2 hours away for the big announcement, the point where the tipping point is reached and Donald Trump becomes the next president. That's at 4:47, 47 being relevant because he is the 47th president. I never knew they did that time thing, but apparently they do. So Donald Trump has just arrived at the White House. Up the steps he's gone with a nice, well, sort of, is it a friendly handshake? I thought Joe Biden was quite dismissive of him, actually. There wasn't much going on, but like Trump gives a hoot what Joe Biden really thinks. And they stood in a nice line and they had some photographs taken, and that was that. Amanda says, Trump versus Starmer. Trump would not wish to harm the British people, unlike Starmer. Trump is not spiteful or vindictive, says Amanda. Chris in Ottershaw. There's a word that's been around for a long time that could replace the word woke. How about stupidity? Yeah, that's not a bad call, actually. Just go, that's stupid. What you just said there is stupid. This one from Simon. Woke has been weaponised. Anyone not wanting a biological man to share a woman and a girl's space is far right. That's how institutions like it. Quite bizarre. Happy Trump Day. Thank you, Simon. Yes, it's weird, isn't it, that you should be OK with your daughter changing in a changing room where a fellow with a beard and a penis is getting changed next to her. Now, I know that's the kind of extreme thing. I don't even think it's about, well, they might sexually assault. Of course they might, yes, and that's a massive factor. One good reason why you wouldn't want it. But actually, I don't. It's just wrong, right? You haven't got to think about that. You haven't got to know loads about gender and equality and changing room policy to go, what? So the bloke gets to change with the girls because he called himself a girl. Yeah, that's what we're doing here over at the local swimming pool. Really? Are you sure about that? Do you think that's fair? Yeah. Why? Because it's equal? Well, no, it's kind of the very sort of antitheses of equal. Yeah, but he's a woman. No, but he's not. And so the argument goes on in all manner of spheres and areas. And that's just the obvious example. We're going to be back with your calls and thoughts in a few moments. 0344 499 1000. Will we get a winner on the Voice of Doom? Remember, don't call in because there's no prize. You can message in if you think you know who this is.
Give me hundreds of examples.
There it is, 87222. If we get a right answer inside around about the next 6 or 7 minutes, we'll reveal all on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock. If we don't, it rolls over till tomorrow. Meantime, this is Talk. Let's get the headlines at 3.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Coming up on 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Lots to get through. Across to the States shortly as well. Donald Trump promising to sign almost 100 executive orders, potentially around immigration and gender areas. Some as soon, apparently, as he's sworn in. He's going to get sworn in, nip round the corner, ask, where's me pen, and sign away. This is as he becomes the 47th President of the United States. You'll hear it all and see it all live here on Talk. Also this afternoon, the teenager accused of killing 3 girls in a knife attack at a dance class in Southport last July has pleaded guilty to their murders. That essentially cuts short a lengthy and protracted court case. The families, I think, will be at least grateful to not have to relive those details and watch a person defending a man responsible. It means he will be sentenced as soon as this Thursday. And British-Israeli woman Emily Damari was among the 3 hostages freed by Hamas after 15 months in captivity as part of the opening phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Details and comments from you on the way as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So, have we got a winner on the Voice of Doom? Well, if you didn't hear the voice, remember it's a mystery voice thing. No, it's not a competition really. It's just a thing. It's a thingy. It's a feature. Whatever, damn it. But it's got a political thing to it. Underpin. It's a thing again. It's a political underpin. It's a political mystery voice. That's the way we should phrase it. This is the voice. Have a listen.
Give me hundreds of examples.
So the question is, who is that? Lots of guesses came through. Rebecca Long Bailey. Oh, remember her? No. Angela Rayner. It is not. Liz Truss. No. Jess Phillips. Hazel Blears. No. Hazel Blears keeps coming up, and it's not Hazel Blears. Michelle Donnellan. It is not. Susan Hall. No. Ruth Kelly. No. Lisa Nandy. No. Bridget Phillipson. No. So have we got a winner? No. Day 10. It's a rolling over, this one. It's the longest Voice of Doom we've had, even with a little clue that we threw in as well. No winner so far. It's back tomorrow at about 2:45. Trevor says, I don't think Trump will sort out all of the world's problems, but he's given hope to millions of us that our own governments will start to go the same way and protect Western culture. It's that, right? That kind of puts it quite nicely. You know, it's not about Western culture being better. It's about common sense prevailing. Saying, am I allowed to apply for that job? What? Well, yeah, why would you not? Because you're a man and they only want girls? What, really? There's all of that to contend with. So that's the example, you know, and, you know, what gets taught in schools and stuff. And I can understand why, you know, Donald Trump has been very animated about it, because that appeals to his base, but beyond his base as well, including over here. He's arrived, though, at the White House now. He's in a meeting with the outgoing President, Joe Biden. Oh, I bet they're having afternoon tea and a little cake. Wouldn't you love to be the fly on the wall at that moment? He's due to be officially sworn in at 14:47 UK time, 47 minutes past the hour, to reflect becoming the 47th president. Trump's promising to sign a blitz of executive orders on his first day, potentially around areas, as I mentioned, immigration and gender. Let's speak with our friend Michael Graham, managing editor at Inside Sources, US political commentator, our man on the Hill. Good afternoon to you, Michael.
Good afternoon. Welcome. So glad that you're here. So much news, so little time.
Indeed. Well,
today. Holy moly.
Yeah.
I mean, we could spend the whole day covering Joe Biden throwing out pardons as he walks out the door. You know, it's just crazy.
Fauci
he pardoned everybody with the January 6th committee, including the staff. Nobody's ever done that. And I thought it was interesting. As of airtime, I haven't checked my Twitter machine in the last few minutes, but not a single prominent Democrat has endorsed what he did, because it's so terrible. It's just never been done. And what you're basically saying is, when Donald Trump finishes up his term, whatever Republicans did on those committees where they have big fat majorities that they barreled through, he'll just pardon everybody, and that'll be that. And this is no way to run a railroad or a democracy.
Yeah, I mean, does every president just do this, though, Michael? No. I know, you know, Trump there were a few characters in his pardoning spree.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, and don't forget, Bill Clinton pardoned a guy who was literally on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list the day he pardoned him. So,
but he was good to his mother.
But my point is, we've had incidental, like, you know, that's a bad pardon, this is a bad pardon. We've never had this wholesale taking everybody who was on federal death row, most of them multiple murderers, and just commuting all the sins except for three. The three that people have heard of, like the Boston Marathon bomber, magically they have no right, you know, to avoid it. He gave out more commutations and pardons of drug criminals than any other president, including Barack Obama. And that doesn't include the one he gave his son. And now he's done this last second pardoning of everybody who, all this does is feed the idea that the January 6th, whatever happened on January 6th, and by the way, I think it was horrible. I think Trump should have been impeached. I thought it was terrible. But the idea that all these people were somehow part of some conspiracy, whatever. No, a bunch of them were just angry people who did something stupid. You know, you see it at you guys call them football games. You know, drunken soccer rowdies. It was stupid. They deserve to be punished. But turning it into a conspiracy, now it all looks political. That doesn't help. And then the big thing that Biden did, just to make sure everyone knows he's one of the worst presidents ever, he invented the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. We've had the Equal Rights Amendment that was pushed through back in the 70s and 80s, and it failed. It had a deadline written into the legislation to pass it. Several states actually revoked their affirmation after they figured out what it would do. Yeah. And Joe Biden declared over the weekend, I've just decided it's in the Constitution. Now, fortunately, our system doesn't work that way, and it's like him deciding that, you know, hair plugs are a male entitlement are in the Constitution. He can say whatever he wants. It's not true. But that's Biden. He's going out uglier than any president since Richard Nixon got on the helicopter.
We had a guy on earlier. I wish you'd been on with him, to be honest, Michael. He was, I mean, to say he wasn't a joke. We had two guys. One was a guy called Jason Meister, former Trump Advisory Board member. The other was a fellow called Malcolm Nance. I don't know if you ever come across Mr. Nance, but he's a former US Navy intelligence officer, and he pathologically hates Donald Trump. We thought he was going to have a coronary at one point.
Right.
We thought his head was going to explode live on air. He was so deranged about Donald Trump. He did not like the man. Fine, it's a democracy. But this guy was having... There were no credits at all to Trump, and Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, was the best man ever. He even said, this guest, that immigration didn't really increase under Biden.
Well, that's like wild. I don't know what to say. I don't even know what to say to that. That's right. Like, there's many Nazis in Paris today as there were in 1943.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that math? You know,
yeah.
Whatever. But so now this is the good news for Donald Trump. Now, I want to preface everything up by reminding everybody, yes, he's the most popular he's ever been. Yes, polls show Americans support his ideas, including mass deportations, overwhelmingly. Yes, 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 yes. But don't forget, it's Donald Trump. He is basically a hand grenade on legs, and he is going to walk around and he's going to blow up. And the question is, will the net be that he does more good by tearing down the stuff like Biden's? The America's attitude towards immigration, much like yours, needs to be blown up. It just got upside down. We decided that enforcing our own law was evil. That's going to get fixed. That's the upside of the explosion. There'll be plenty of downsides too. And so everybody's putting themselves on the limb of, I see great presidency ahead. I see Donald Trump ahead. And the thing about Donald Trump, and if he teaches politicians one thing, this is what he would have taught them in 2016 if Democrats hadn't decided to go at him cleats high. Politicians want people to like them. And that's a good thing. Telling the people, I don't care how you feel about guys playing in girls' sports. It's the right thing to do. Screw you. That's not good. Even on gay marriage, the wrong way to do it was the way we did it, just forced it on everybody. If they'd waited 10 years, people's attitudes would have changed. We would have voted it in. It would have that's the process that's so important. Donald Trump wants people to like him, and so he's going to try to do things people like. And you know what? That's not bad. That's called democracy.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why
we've lost a lot of that. And that's the difference between making the liberals drink their tears, which is a dumb way to govern, getting MAGA and put those fascists in their place. Dumb way to govern. Hey, Americans really do want to do something about how many manufacturing jobs we've lost. Hey, we are really worried about China. Their cheating is so bad, we have to take measures, maybe higher tariffs. People like all that stuff. If he does that, he's going to be in good shape. Sure, he's going to do some dumb stuff. He's going to pardon a bunch of J6ers. Thanks to Joe Biden, no one's going to notice. And so he'll do some other dumb stuff too. But if he can keep it between the lines, he can remind people that trying to lead the Americans the way they want to be led is often a good thing. Sometimes the public doesn't understand something and they get something wrong, and you need to explain to them. But we could use more, I think, of what we call good old-fashioned sucking up.
Yeah, I mean, this business of the executive orders, I mean, I noticed opponents have gone, hang on a second, what is this? What sort of totalitarian state is this going to be, where he's just going to come in and go, this is the new law, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to patang, stop this, and papa, make that happen, because I'm the president. That's how it's being defined by his enemies. The reality is, of course, he has a presidential right to sign executive orders. I mean, he hasn't just invented that.
And there are two kinds. One is the kind Joe Biden did about the 28th Amendment, the Equal Free Rights Act. You can just sign it and then it's there and it's cute and then it has no force of power.
Yeah.
And then there are ones that do. Remember, Joe Biden killed the Keystone XL pipeline. So instead of that oil coming from Canada and going to clean refineries on the U.S. coast, it's going out on diesel ships to be shipped to Asia to be refined at dirty refineries to make more pollution, because that's helping the environment. On the border, why did the border get so bad under Biden? Executive orders. Trump had a plan, a rule. You had to remain in Mexico waiting for your adjudication. And that way you couldn't come in the U.S. and just disappear into the border. Biden ended all that, and shockingly, we had the biggest surge across the border ever. So see my point? So Trump is going to sign some executive orders that are going to make huge headlines and mean nothing. And then he's going to sign some other executive orders that people aren't going to notice. For example, making it easier for your boss in the Department of Agriculture or whatever to fire you. Because he found out the last time he was president that all these, the phrase we use in the U.S., I don't know what you say, is the deep state. And some people think of that as like a sinister, like secret, Hydra, Hail Hydra. What it really means is, and I have friends of mine who are this, they're lifelong government workers and they're burrowed down in the bureaucracy and they don't care what the direction of the elected people is. They have their own agenda.
Yeah.
And those people really hurt Trump, and he wants to make it easier to get rid of those people. And once again, that's the premise of democracy. You can like it, you can hate it, but the fact is the people voted to go Trump's direction. And if you work for the Department of Justice or whatever, and you're not prepared to do that, you probably need to find another job.
Yeah, spot on. Tell us about this 47 minutes
right
past 4:47, basically 16:47, whatever you want to call it. But the 47 thing, he becomes the president. I've never known that was always the deal. But so it was. Is that a thing?
I don't know that it's always the deal. I'm pretty sure that that Reagan did not do it, as I recall off the top of my head. So I'll have to check that. But I will say that Trump is such a marketing genius. People think, for example, they see Trump Hotel and Trump wine and Trump beef, whatever. Yep. Trump isn't out herding the cattle to make the Trump beef. He's a licensing machine. He puts his name on things. He doesn't run the hotel, most of the hotels. He puts his name on them. He has marketed 47 and 4. In fact, one of the things that there were people close to Trump that were afraid of was that Biden would be somehow not able to finish his term or choose to step down and make Kamala Harris the 47th president for a couple of days and bump Trump to 48, and all this money they spent marketing 45 to 47 would be lost. So It's a marketing thing for him. It highlights that he's done something that has been done for more than 100 years, Grover Cleveland. It highlights that he's had the biggest political comeback since at least Nixon in 1960, when he lost the presidency, lost the governor's race, and then came back to win a massive win later on.
Yeah.
So it's all part of the marketing, and they're very happy to have that 47 branded with, as all of his supporters say, that I don't understand why, Donald J. Trump. Why do we have to say the J? Is there some other Donald out trying?
Yes.
I don't get it.
Is there another Donald Trump?
It's like when people are mad and they go, Jesus H. I'm like, well,
yeah.
You think that's going to fool God? Like, again, oh, no, I meant that other Jesus. No, Jesus H. Jesus Horatio.
Yes, that one. Yes. I mean, there might be another one out there. I think I told you this before, that we used to... We used to phone around, but we'd go through the white pages and try and find somebody who had the same name as Bill Clinton or whatever.
Really?
Phone around, and we got slightly scuppered when we rang. We found a Harry Truman, the name Harry Truman,
right.
And we thought, we'll give it a call. And what we didn't realise is that we literally got through to his granddaughter's house or something. Because we said, is Harry there? And she went, no, I'm afraid he's not. And we thought, oh, okay. So
you used the word bogey to mean an unpleasant thing that children snot. Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, you can say that. Yes.
So we have booger is
booger,
the U.S.
That's right.
version.
Yes.
And a friend of mine found a guy named John Booger.
Beautiful.
In the phone book. He called him at 2 a.m. and said, "Hello, can I speak to James?" "What?" "I'm trying to reach James." This is John." "No, I'm sorry, I'm trying to reach James Booger." "Oh, no, this is John Booger." "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have picked the wrong booger," and hung up. And that was his claim to fame.
That's a sort of thing you do, isn't it? When you're either you've drank too much or when you're a kid. That's beautiful.
Let's face it, Donald Trump would do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
The equivalent of that. Did you see him dancing to YMCA?
I saw him dancing to that. I thought that was very open of him and very, very unassuming. He didn't care.
So you listeners know I'm an old school Reagan libertarian leaning Republican. Trump is not my brand. I like government does last minute. We're the guys that got shoved out by the populist movement. So I'm not happy that everything. But if you sent me that photo from yesterday to 10 years ago and said what it was, President-elect Donald Trump preparing for a second term, dancing with the members, I would have said, okay, something went wrong. The time machine. There's a hole in the space. You're on drugs.
Sure.
I mean, seriously, try to think about Donald Trump in 2014 and now. And I don't care if you loathe him. You have to admit it is one of the great, most entertaining, most, in a way, hopeful, despite him. I'm saying, like, it shows whatever your flaws, that things can happen and whatever morals you want to take out of it. It is just I cannot think of another American story that is, from a plot standpoint, as amazing. And I think if Democrats will let go of the hate, embrace the plot, and then say, okay, so what can we do? Let's have our great turnaround. Let's surprise America with a great vision that they can embrace in 4 years. They might learn a lesson as well, but they show no signs of doing that.
As we've been speaking in the last few minutes, the Clintons have arrived. So that's the time to leave, isn't it, at that point? When you do.
Well,
oh, God, not them again.
What I love is Bill Clinton looking up at the YMCA and Trump and going, "Yeah, I've been there, done that."
Yeah.
So when I did it, there weren't any clothes involved. So
that's right. Yeah. Interesting. Followed by Boris Johnson, who for some reason was behind the Clintons. He's got an invite, but of course the current leaders don't get an invite. That's just the way it is. But it's
strange world.
Yeah, strange indeed. So we're an hour or so away. Is it a proud moment? Is it always a big moment for an American, Michael, when this happens, regardless of your political skin? Is it something, bearing in mind, the whole essence of America and democracy and the land of the free? Is it always noted and celebratory in one respect or another when a new president is sworn in?
So there's pomp and circumstance every time. Just like at every funeral, you go through the same thing for a funeral. But that's not the same as what's happening now. I mean, I would compare this to 2008, and then before that, I would compare it to 1980. I mean, I really think there's a feeling, whether it's true or not, and once again, Trump's walking hand grenade, he can blow it all up, but there really is a feeling that a bunch of ideas that used to work and didn't, or never worked, and we wouldn't admit it, are going to be sloughed aside, and that we're going to attempt to enter something new. His supporters are insanely thrilled, happy, beyond. Yeah. In 2016, they were nervous. They didn't know if the guy could do the job. His opponents are beaten down and more quiet. They realize they've lost a lot of the arguments. So if you hate Trump, you're with him on immigration and taxes and whatnot. And so really, this feels, in a way, not as much, but it's on the same thermometer as far as passion as when Barack Obama was sworn in 2009. That was just an astonishing thing to watch. Once again, set aside his policies. He ended up not being a very good president, but it was an amazing moment. And then Reagan, I'm don't remember it, but my understanding is it was revolution was in the air in 1980. When
Yeah, that would sound about right. And these moments don't come around every 4 years, as you rightly say, but once in a while they do, and this is absolutely one of them. Michael, enjoy the rest of the day. I know I say enjoy, you're busy, you're working, you always are. You'll be writing this up and following it, as you always do, with your usual expertise on things. Thank you to Michael Graham. He's managing editor at Inside Sources, US political commentator. He's our man on Capitol Hill, although he was standing in front of his own bookshelf. But there it is, all happening. Only an hour or more to go until, of course, the inauguration. You'll hear it all here live here on Talk.
He is going to drill numerous executive orders regarding basically getting more cheap, reliable energy. My God, we need more of that. Ending all the electric vehicle mandates for the net zero policies, because no one wants to buy these cars and they're all made in China anyway. Ending what he calls the transgender lunacy. He says, with a stroke of my pen on day one. So basically, absolute nonsense. The US government will recognise only two genders, because there are only two genders.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
John says President Trump was great last night. The woke creeps are spitting feathers. Yeah, that was the YMCA bit of shindig thing. Anna, who's so happy in Surrey, says there's something rather cathartic about walking around my workplace at the moment, watching all my woke lefty colleagues crying and hand-wringing about the Donald, whilst I cackle like a maniac in my head. I love that. Let's go to Heather in Girvan. Heather, how are you doing?
Hello, Ian, my baby. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, my darling.
Well, I've watched the Operation Inauguration rally last night on CNN channel. And it was absolutely fantastic. Elon Musk and his son was there. The YMCA song with the village people. Tell you what, that is one of my favourite songs, by the way.
Is it?
And I love it, in the 80s.
Yep.
And now I'm watching the full ceremony on NBC News, and I've been watching all the list of the stellar casts of the former presidents, vice presidents, and their wives, and it's all kicking off right now, and it's absolutely fantastic.
So you're pleased
Donald
about it, Heather?
Trump,
Yeah.
one thing about Donald Trump is he is the best president that America had so far, and welcome home for him to do so, to come back.
There it is.
Because one thing about Keir Starmer is going to have to watch it with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, he is a tough guy.
Yeah.
And he is straightforward, is Donald Trump. He shoots from the hip. And he is one of the most straight-talking presidents that America has ever had.
Well, you see, that is absolutely it. Heather, thank you for that. It's a ringing endorsement of the new president. He comes back. Only one other president, who the other president is in history that has come back, missed a term and then returned. But there it is. He's got his next 4 years sorted out. Great Christmases in the Oval Office. President Trump is back, and in just over an hour he will be sworn in. They're doing this inside, partly because it's about -11 in Washington at the moment. All the dignitaries are showing up. Some of our own former prime ministers are there. The Clintons are there, the Obamas. Well, I don't think Michelle's there. Where's Michelle gone these days? She's disappeared from the scene. But some very, very important people. We'll let you know if any surprises, like the old Kardashian shows up or something. Back to that issue of the word woke. Ash in Slough says, I use the phrase the full Trudeau for woke. It started after he said that all truckers were racist, homophobic, transphobic and misogynistic. At the same time as having his photographer happening to find a lone group called truckers with masks and a swastika. You'll notice Khan often goes the full Trudeau, as does most members of London's front bench. The full Trudeau, it's great. No, the greatest moment of Trudeau, and I genuinely thought I thought somebody had made this up, when a reporter asked Trudeau about something about the future of mankind, and he literally said, "We don't use words like that. It's people kind." Literally, and I thought, no, that's not a real thing. That's something that people quote as the most extreme example of what might happen in an uber woke world, and everyone goes, well, that would never happen. No, nobody would do that. You'd have to be some kind of supercharged nut job. You'd have to be really, your brain, you'd have to be your cranial department would have to be full of cement, frankly, to think that anybody would ever go there and say, no one really does that. Yeah, he did. Trudeau went there. He literally went there and said, yeah, we don't say mankind. I love the we. If I was the reporter, I'd have gone, sorry, can you qualify the we don't say it? You mean you don't, Justin? You big girl's blouse. So you can say that now. Couldn't say that before either. Lots to get through. 0344 499 1000. There is another interesting aspect, by the way, on the Southport attacker who's pleaded guilty to murder, Axel Ruda-Cubana. 3 girls killed, and there were other offences as well. He pled guilty this morning at Southport, at Liverpool Crown Court. The attacks took place on the 29th of July. And these were kids, 9, 6 and 7. He also admitted 10 counts of attempted murder, possession of a kitchen knife, further pleaded guilty to producing ricin and possessing of Al-Qaeda training manual found during the searches. He refused to stand to or confirm his name at Liverpool Crown Court before pleading guilty. And he's going to be sentenced on Thursday. What's interesting about this, it's understood, because he's going to get a life sentence, right? There's no doubt about that. It's just a case of what the minimum term is. And many were speculating was going to be a whole life term, isn't it? It's sort of Lucy Letby sort of territory in that respect. But we understand that judges can only impose a whole life order on criminals who are aged 21 and over at the time of an offence. He would not be entitled to that. He would have been seen as a minor in legal terms when that offence took place. That doesn't mean you don't get I think this guy's going to prison for, 40, 50 years. That would be my guess. It's interesting the case has finished almost before it started because of the guilty plea. I think the family will be grateful that there was a guilty plea because it means they haven't got to go through the indignity and the horror of listening to some horrendous details, photographs, video evidence, and of course they're well aware of what happened to their own children. They know that, but to relive it in that kind of sanitised setting of a courtroom where you have a lawyer who is going to defend the indefensible, because that is, like it or not, that's the way it works. But you'd have to listen to that as a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a lawyer giving reasons why your client might have done what they did or not did what they did. So it saved that horror of having to go through that. It's unfortunately created more. I've never known a case that has created so many conspiracy theories in this respect, and there's so much attached to it. I wouldn't even know where to start. The idea that, I don't know what we were meant to be told that we weren't told that upset so many people, to the point that somebody said, well, it was perfectly legit to set fire to things and burn people if we want to and kick the teeth out of police officers. Unless it's at an airport, then it's not. But that was fine to do that in the street. But so I'm not quite, there was this whole thing, we should have been told. I don't understand. I never did understand what's the bit we weren't told that would have made a difference. Can you shine a light? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. It's just gone 3:30.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
There's a lot of talk about who is and who was invited to the inauguration. Viktor Orban apparently was invited from Hungary. Maybe he is. Perhaps he has been invited. Conventionally, you don't, as a foreign leader, you don't tend to go to inaugurations. That's the general rule, and I don't think a British Prime Minister has ever gone to one, if that makes sense. Although Sam says apparently Maloney was invited to the inauguration. I notice on social media lots of people are saying everyone was invited apart from Keir Starmer. I promise you, that didn't happen. 0344 499 1000. But Prime Minister Keir Starmer is expected to visit Washington within weeks for talks with Donald Trump. The Labour government faces challenges with the new administration, including proposed trade tariffs and tensions over the UK's Chagos Island deal. But the Prime Minister remains optimistic, saying the special relationship between Britain and the United States will thrive under Donald Trump. Let's speak with Joseph Sternberg, Wall Street Journal editorial board. Joseph, afternoon to you, sir.
Hello.
Good to have you with us. It's always been the big question, the special relationship, and then, you know, every country does it, don't they? And then they go to France, and that's where the special relationship is, and then they go to Japan, and that's where the special relationship is. If you had to gauge it, if you can, even allowing Joseph for my slightly cynical approach to this, where does the UK rank in terms of special relationships with the Americans?
I think it's very important to Americans, and I think that's something to keep in mind, which should partly be comforting in the face of whatever tensions there might be between Keir Starmer and members of the Labour Party on one side and Donald Trump on the other. Because remember, American foreign policy, the president is very important to that, but it's bigger than the president. I think that Congress exercises a lot of sway, and I mean, you have to be responsive to the voters. And on both of those scores, I think that there is an understanding that the United Kingdom is a very important relationship for America. It's an important economic relationship. It's an important military and security relationship. So I think that we can expect that there are going to be some, very Trumpian quirks to that. His attitude towards these issues tends to be much more transactional, much more personal. I think that that's something that Keir Starmer and Labour are going to have to deal with. But I think that it is going to be true that the fact that we have a new president doesn't change the fact that a lot of people in Washington understand how important this connection is on both sides.
Yeah, and of course, any president has to deal with countries where the leader might not be of their own political skin, somebody with a different idea. I mean, if you only dealt with people who agree with you, that would be a very weird place. And you might find yourself in an area or a time then where most of the other countries might not agree with you. So you deal with everybody, ideally, right?
Yes. Now, we do have to say that, Starmer and various Labour figures such as David Lammy and, frankly, a lot of other politicians across Europe have probably made this much harder for themselves than it needed to be over the past few years because Trump's political personality encourages people to opine on him even when it would be better if they didn't.
Sure.
I think that, things would probably be easier for the UK right now if, a bunch of British politicians had exercised the judgment to say, look, we might have to deal with him at some point. So there's no reason for us to make negative statements about him before the election. But I think that now that has happened, you can't go back, you can only go forward. And I think that there will be opportunities for them to try to make their peace with him and cultivate a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And in terms of what that looks like, I mean, we mentioned the Chagos Islands in the introduction there. That's clearly going to be an area that certainly we understand Donald Trump feels strongly about. I don't know how strongly Keir Starmer feels about it. From what I can gather, Joseph, this was a deal that he actually inherited. I don't think it was of his making. The previous administration had kind of cobbled this one together. Is that the sort of thing, can you imagine Trump, we can imagine Trump doing anything, can you imagine Trump saying, look, I'm not even going to speak to you until you get this Chagos thing sorted out? Would it be as robust as that?
Well, I'm not necessarily sure how much Donald Trump is going to care specifically about the Sheikos issue, but you know, it's important to note we're talking about that issue because it's an issue of security in the Indo-Pacific, especially involving China, which is something that a lot of people in the Trump administration care a lot about. And I think that that is a big potential pitfall because we have seen in recent weeks that Labor, by default, because of their domestic economic and political problems in the UK, are trying to develop a closer relationship with China at the same time that the US is potentially becoming more skeptical. And so I think that a big part of the challenge for Starmer and Rachel Reeves and David Lammy in terms of cultivating that transatlantic relationship is going to be figuring out what is the correct approach to China that is good for the British economy and British security, which frankly is probably more skeptical of China than they have been, and that also is consistent with the alliance with the US.
In terms of these executive orders that Mr. Trump apparently is going to sign, and wasting no time at all, we understand, straight into the White House, into the Oval Office, big box of executive orders, his quill of determination in one hand, ready to fire off all these things that annoy him, get it all changed, etc. I mean, is that unusual for an incoming president? Is that the usual chronology of what happens once you've been sworn in, Joseph?
It isn't unusual, actually. I think that if you go back in history, you would find that often the first day is greeted by a flurry of executive orders, because that is something that the president can do. I mean, we forget in the American system that the presidency is weak in a lot of ways. They're dependent on Congress to pass budgets and legislation, so the executive orders are often some of the only leverage that they have, and they like to use it. What is unusual is sort of the seriousness of the issues that he's likely to approach here. We're expecting executive orders on immigration policy that are potentially going to be pretty consequential, on energy policy that could be consequential. But I think that, this is a representative of the fact that this is the job that the public elected Trump to do. And he understands that, especially since he now only has the next 4 years, he can't run again. He has to build momentum very quickly.
And the other area, of course, that found itself under the spotlight was TikTok. I mean, even just the term, the word TikTok, which sounds, very sort of... If we'd have been talking, Joseph, 10 years ago, and I'd said, let's talk about TikTok, it would have sounded like a nursery rhyme, right? What's going on? Why is it important? What's happening here? But, of course, it's a very lucrative Chinese company. And probably owned by the Chinese government and all of those kind of accusations. Biden says we don't want that around these parts. Mr. Trump is a little bit more perhaps accommodating to the requests of TikTok. What's likely to happen here?
I'm as baffled as everyone else about what's going on here. I think that this is representative of kind of the internal politics that will be going on in Washington within the Republican Party, because I think that there's a lot of concern bipartisan in Washington and also among Republicans about the security implications of an app that has this kind of connection to the Chinese Communist Party, getting access to so much Americans' user data and being able to influence political opinions in the discussion via their algorithm. It's unusual and kind of odd that Trump has positioned himself in this way. And now I think that we, and frankly, also the Chinese side of this, are going to have to wait to see whether this is actually a sincere opinion on his part or whether this is a stance that he has adopted as some kind of negotiating position. And we could find that he's very mercurial on this issue.
Yeah, and he hasn't said he's just overturning it, right? He's saying, look, we'll look at something and maybe there'll be a 90-day thing. And so that's a very different vibe. But it may well turn out that the most symbolic thing, or the most symbolic moment in the relationship that Trump and China will eventually have actually came from the kernel of a social media site called TikTok. Who would have thought it? Not about big weapons or, some other horrendous human rights abuse. A video platform where you can watch funny cat videos and bake cakes.
It's the world we live in. But, you know, again, I think that this is getting at some of the important national security issues that are going to be very important to this administration right from the start and potentially very contentious.
Listen, Joseph, always a pleasure. Nice to have you on, sir. Joseph Sternberg is with us. He's from the Wall Street Journal, one of our finest razor-sharp journalistic heads. Thank you to him. As we speak, Donald Trump is on his way. He's left the White House, having had the powwow and a cream slice with Mr. Biden. The removal vans quickly snuck in as Trump left. They threw all of Biden's clobber into there. All manner of stuff went in there. You couldn't believe what's gone in the back of that thing, including Joe himself. So they were spectacularly removed. And now, of course, Donald Trump is off for the inauguration, which is across town, as the phrase goes. It's inside because it's about -10 over there in Washington. It's snowy, it's chilly, and all the dignitaries are awaiting. And it's literally an hour from now on the dot at 16:47 that the official announcement that this is your new president, Mr. President, you are the president, all of that business will happen. But right now he's making his way to the area where that will all take place, and we'll bring you the whole thing live here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is 10 to 4 on Talk. Jeremy Carr's going to be here on the other side of the news at 4 o'clock. Full inauguration details. Mr. Trump has turned up at the venue to be sworn in as the 47th US president, along with, Joe Biden. By the way, I joked about Joe being thrown into the back of a removal van. He obviously goes to the inauguration himself. So he's there as well, and they've entered together into the venue, ready and waiting. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. What have you got for us, Andrew? Hi.
Yeah, it was the relationship. Good afternoon, Ian. You do a cracking job. It's the relationship between Trump and Starmer. So let's look at it logically. What value does Starmer bring to Trump? Nothing. So Trump is an American manager, senior manager, business person. The one thing they don't like is surprises.
Yes.
So Starmer, being a lawyer from North London, the worst sort of human being on God's earth, he has closed Trump out by presenting Mandelson to him. And then the village idiot, thick as mince, Lammy, has said Starmer will meet Trump in a matter of weeks. Trump doesn't have to meet him. He could he can hang Starmer out to dry by not meeting him for 6 weeks. I mean, Blair saw him. There's no doubt that you saw Boris get across and meet Biden. You look at the timescales. They'll hang Starmer out to dry because he hung them out to dry. He hung Trump out to dry. He's going to get it back large.
When you say hung him out to dry, I mean, is that based on the fact that him and a few mates said some hurty things about him beforehand, or was there anything more substantial?
The thing that would really, and we don't know, it's conjecture, I'd love to obviously meet the person, but if you're running a campaign and someone actually actively sends people out to campaign against you, does that person ever do anything other than become your enemy?
But that's happened at every American election. The Tories campaign for the Republicans and the Labour campaign for the Democrats.
Okay, I see
the
point.
And in fact, Nigel Farage is campaigning. Donald Trump is campaigning for Nigel Farage. So, I mean, who went out there as well. I mean, you are allowed to pick a side, right?
Yeah, remember, Trump's only working with Nigel. Yeah, Trump's working with Nigel Farage because he knows a winner when he sees one, and he's not.
I'm sure.
And so the reality is I believe that actually he will hang Starmer out because it's in his interest to make Starmer suffer. And remember, lawyers made Trump suffer in business and his personal life, so he's going to have it over on a very unpleasant North London lawyer.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And there is quite a body of... I mean, it's not just as if Starmer once sort of, said so. In fact, I think of all the... I think Starmer's the only person that isn't on record of saying something terrible about Trump, but certainly David Lammy is. Peter Mandelson absolutely is. And the world's worst politician, Sadiq Khan, as I'm sure you're aware, Andrew, can't stop himself. I mean, literally the worst kind of politician, a sort of totalitarian kind of ineptitude that is breathtaking.
Yeah, he's not the worst politician. He's one of the worst human beings on planet Earth with his failure to address the rape of those young girls in London. The reality is you look across the board, it's a weak government led by a weak leader. And remember, American politicians are immaculate. They look... collar and tie, suit, clean shoes. When they look at Lammy arriving dressed like Charlie Caroli from Billy Smart Circus.
There's a name for the kids.
Well, trust me, there wasn't a lot of woke in that circus.
No, there certainly wasn't, was there? Yeah, who knows what Caroli got up to. It's a great call, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew in Hertfordshire. Look, our entirety... America are not going to suddenly announce we're doing no business with the United Kingdom. Of course they will. They'll continue to trade with us as they always have done. That won't stop. Imports, exports will do the same at this end. The question is whether you get a trade deal, which is something a little more significant. It's probably not likely to happen anytime soon. Didn't happen under the last administration. Hasn't happened for a long time. And when I say the last, I mean the last British administration under Rishi Sunak. Everyone's been looking for one. That's a far firmer arrangement and a more lucrative one if you get it right. He might do. Maybe there'll be a big surprise there. But I think the worst that could happen is that nothing really happens. It just remains a bit neutral. There's no great moment or great comment or statement from Trump or anybody else. It just becomes, well, they're carrying on. Trump will never like Starmer, and you know in his heart that Starmer will never like Donald Trump. It's as simple as that. We're nearly done, but Jeremy Kyle.
Why are we talking about somebody as completely irrelevant as Sir Keir Starmer? As I said on Plank of the Week this week, did you hear what I said?
Go on.
The United Kingdom, its Prime Minister, was not invited to the inauguration, but Alex Phillips was. That's all you need
Alex
to say.
Phillips was, that's
and
true.
she's there. And that's all you. That's all you need to say.
Have you seen Alex?
Yeah, I've seen her.
We were trying to look for her. To be fair, no other Prime Minister has been invited.
Why are you defending that ridiculous waste of space?
No, because no Prime Minister has ever been.
I don't live anywhere else. I live here, and our Prime Minister has not been invited. It's massively embarrassing, and entirely down to the fact that he's an idiot.
Yeah, I want to see Alex Phillips. I want to know where Alex is.
Are you excited about this?
I'm always excited about the...
Ricky just gave me a great line that he thinks that Trump could use. It's a revolution of common sense.
Go on.
Which is our language, isn't it? I mean, I read today all sorts of things. He's 200 executive orders. Maybe one of his first things allegedly could be no use of pronouns in any federal buildings or government workers at all. I'm getting rid of all that rubbish.
I think that might happen.
I mean, but why are you so shocked? It's common sense, man.
No, I'm not shocked. We've been talking about it all afternoon. It's absolutely bang
in
on.
this country, they're all jumping up and down, aren't they? The leftists are going, he's this, he's that.
I was going to get rid of our pronouns. Good. Who cares about your pronouns?
What are your pronouns? Ian, that's, you know, but I mean, what
well, I'd actually like they, he, she, it or what, but that's another story.
With what's going on in the world, what I really would like him to do is bring on stage Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris, just together. Just everybody can laugh for 10 minutes, and then that would be great, wouldn't it?
But hey, remember these guys? And on they go, and everybody
I just think she looks as bitter as... I'm convinced as well about Biden. Rick was just saying this as well. I'm convinced that he's going to go... because I think he hated Kamala Harris taking over for him. I think he was delighted that Trump beat Kamala Harris because I think he could then say, I beat Donald Trump and you got rid of me and she didn't and that's it and I'm off to wherever I'm going.
Wouldn't you, if you were Biden, wouldn't you just go to and sit there and chill on a beach in Hawaii for at least the next year and do naff all?
Yes. Did you hear he said welcome home when Donald Trump arrived at the White House?
Is that what he said?
Welcome home.
That's very nice.
Listen, it's pretty unprecedented. Here's a question for you that I'd like anybody to answer. I don't know if it's true. We were just asking. You know his cabinet picks that had to go before the Senate last week? They were all interviewed, weren't they, Robert?
Yeah.
Right, so have they got the jobs or not got the jobs? Because how can you start being a president, as somebody just said to me...
Without a defence secretary.
Without a defence secretary and without a secretary of state. So have they been confirmed? Because we haven't heard any. There's Mrs Bezos to be. Look in the white suit there.
Is that man alive? Talk about stretch your face some more. What's going on there?
It's cost a lot of money. She's just tapping Jeff on the back. That's cost him £1 billion. Her
cheeks are in different postcodes.
Do you not think it's weird though? You've got Bezos and Zuckerberg. You've got all the big players. He's pulled it out the bag. And I read something earlier that he left